Chapter 1381. The one you chose. Lu Tian laughed. That old Taoist wants to win against my super dark horse. Ren Aoyou and Pai Yangqiu also laughed disapprovingly. For the past 3 days, they had been paying attention to the old Taoist. He was just an honest miner, and was even worse than the female cultivator named Su Tong. They could not see any possibility of him winning the championship. They just thought that Lung Yuan was blinded and stopped paying attention to him. Lung Yuan said, "You wouldn't say that if you knew what technique he was practicing." Li Qingshan exhaled viciously and tossed aside his 2 brothers who had been beaten half to death. He snatched their arcane treasures rudely and picked up the 2 baskets of origin magnets they had stolen. He was just about to make his way out of the cave. "Fellow cultivator, please wait." Li Qingshan turned around and saw an old Taoist with white hair and a youthful complexion walking out from the other side of the cave. He frowned. "What is it?" The old Taoist said politely, "Can you please put down these primary magnets?" Li Qingshan raised his eyebrows and raised the 2 baskets of primary magnets in his hands. "Are you talking about these?" No, there's also that one over there." The old Taoist pointed at the iron basket in the distance. Li Qingshan shook his head and sighed, "Difficult. Fellow cultivator, you mentioned 3 difficulties in a row. Are you unable to give up these 3 baskets of primary magnets? How about this? I'm not an unreasonable person. I'll exchange my basket with you." The old Taoist put down the basket on his back. It was only half filled with primary magnets of average quality. "It's just some broken stones. It's not that difficult to give them up. What's the purpose of that? The world is full of bastards like you. It's too damn difficult for me to be a good person." Li Qingshan's roar shook the cave. It was filled with accusations against the cruel world and a trace of uncontrollable killing intent. The old Taoist's expression changed slightly. He laughed. "If you don't want to live in this world, I can help you." A cold light flashed in his eyes, and his tall and thin body suddenly swelled up. His bulging muscles stretched his loose Taoist robe to the point that it was about to split open. In an instant, he became a muscular man, and even his expression became ferocious. He casually punched the rock wall beside him. The rock wall suddenly caved in, forming a huge pit. The entire cave trembled with the loud noise. The technique that I'm cultivating is called the essence-snatching, chi-concealing, fetus-concealing technique. It can restrain all the blood and chi in one's body and nurture one's nascent soul like a placenta. However, when it's needed, it can also transform all the mana in one's nascent soul into blood and chi, making one's body indestructible and powerful. Have you ever heard of it? So it's this technique. Isn't this a demonic technique? Ruan Yaozhu frowned. This essence-stealing chi-concealing embryo technique was not as simple as just restraining one's own blood and chi. It also seized the blood essence of others and turned it into a placenta to nourish the golden core and nascent soul. It was even said that there were some people who specially trained on infants who were not yet 1 year old. Not only were they easy to refine, but they could also obtain innate spiritual chi. It was extremely cruel and vicious. Lu Tian praised. Senior Martial Brother Lung really has good eyesight. This technique is all about concealing one's essence chi. It can't even fool us. Junior Martial Sister Ruan. These loose cultivators from small sects don't have the 10,000 heavenly book to choose from like us in the myriad sect. We really can't be too particular about techniques. Ruan Yaozhu remained silent. This old Taoist only cultivated demonic techniques, but even his temperament was problematic. He was even more righteous than the 2 brothers when it came to robbing others. However, the myriad sect was all-inclusive and had never been strict when it came to accepting disciples. This was not something that she could change. But strangely, she was no longer worried about Li Qingshan. However, he no longer worried about Li Qingshan. Instead, he felt a strange sense of confidence. He believed that Li Qingshan would definitely teach him a vicious lesson. After being provoked again and again, Li Qingshan's killing intent was boiling. He silently circulated the Qilin's strategy of longevity. He licked his slightly dry lips and asked the two brothers who were pretending to be dead, "Do you want your weapons back?" The two brothers opened their eyes and nodded. Losing the prime magnet was already a huge loss. If they lost their magic treasures as well, then they would really suffer a huge loss. "Kill this muscular old Taoist for me." Li Qingshan threw the fan and walking stick back into their hands. These two broken magic treasures were nothing in his eyes. He was afraid that if he continued to fight, he wouldn't be able to hold back the killing intent in his heart. That would really damage the Qilin sway. He sat on a rock at the side and said, "Hurry up." The two brothers took the magic treasures and jumped up. Although they were beaten very badly, Li Qingshan showed mercy and didn't harm their lives. For nascent soul cultivators, as long as their nascent souls weren't damaged, physical injuries weren't a big deal. The fair-faced young master's face was swollen. He rubbed his hands together with a fawning expression and said, "Fellow Taoist, no, senior, can you be magnanimous and let us brothers go? Return the prime magnet to us as well? We brothers are willing to follow you." Li Qingshan simply closed his eyes and said, "I'll count to 3. The two brothers felt a chill in their hearts. "Old Taoist, hurry up and accept your death." The muscular old Taoist took a step back. He didn't expect Li Qingshan to have this move. He was facing 3 nascent soul cultivators at once. Moreover, the Earth Fiend magnetic array was still there. He instantly felt that the situation was not good. "Humph, then I can only deal with the 2 of you first." The muscular old Taoist recalled the tragic state of the 2 brothers when they were beaten up by Li Qingshan and became even more confident. He crushed the rocks and took big strides, charging forward. The 2 brothers waved the walking stick and the fan. Strong smoke billowed and strong winds blew. The wind fueled the fire, and the fire fueled the wind. They repeated the same trick, and another fire dragon rushed toward the muscular old Taoist. The muscular old Taoist was in a wide cave. Unlike Li Qingshan, who was blocked in a narrow passage, he had more space to dodge. There were also many rock pillars that could be used as rocks. However, he recalled what he saw just now. Li Qingshan rushed out of the sea of fire and scathed. He was sure that the power of magic would be greatly weakened in the prime magnet mountain. His current physique was definitely not weaker than Li Qingshan's. There was no reason that he couldn't do what he could. As long as he got close, the 2 brothers would be at his mercy. Therefore, he held his breath and rushed into the sea of fire without hesitation. The 2 brothers were shocked. They also recalled the same scene and felt a little nervous. They were afraid that someone would rush over to hold them down and beat them up again. Just as they were worrying, they suddenly heard the muscular old Taoist scream. The muscular old Taoist was rolling on the ground from the fire. His tight Taoist robe and his hair were all burned. All of them were burned to a crisp. The strong winds were like countless sharp blades cutting down, like a death sentence. No, it was worse than death by 1,000 cuts. Although his physique was strong, it was obvious that he did not have the bloodline of the Phoenix Demon or the Tiger Demon. He did not have the willpower to endure the torture and rush through the sea of fire. Li Qingshan opened his eyes and took a look. "You even have muscles in your head. Even if I can't do it, you can do it." The 2 brothers were instantly relieved. they used even more effort to activate the wind and fire. It condensed into a fiery snake that danced wildly and tightly wrapped around the muscular Taoist priest, not giving him any chance to escape. Listening to his blood-curdling screams, the Taoist priest's face was filled with cruel pleasure. It was obvious that he was venting his anger. Even the true disciples did not expect that what they thought was a life-and-death battle would end in such a ridiculous way. Seeing that victory was certain, Lu Tian laughed. "Junior brother Lung, I have to admire your sharp eyes. This old Taoist is also a vicious person. Unfortunately, his brain is not very good. In the end, my dark horse is still smarter." Lung Yuan's face seemed to turn colder. Originally, with the old Taoist's essence-stealing qi concealing embryo technique, he could have easily defeated the two brothers even if he threw a stone from afar. He might even have been a match for Li Qingshan. Unexpectedly, he was stupid enough to use a body of flesh and blood without the protection of vital energy. It was extremely stupid to resist the spell cast by two nascent soul cultivators. Pai Yangqiu said, "Senior brother Lu, congratulations, you finally won a round." Lu Tian's smile faded a little. "Anyway, I did not lose. I did not expect junior sister Wan to be the biggest winner this time. As expected, newbies are more lucky." Wan Yaozhu said, "Seriously, senior brother Lu, I did not want to win. I just wanted to tell you that the human heart is not as bad as you think." Lu Tian raised his hands in surrender. "Fine, fine. The winner takes all. Whatever the winner says is right." The two brothers burned the muscular old Taoist until his entire body was charred black, and he was half dead. His muscles withered again, and the cave was filled with the smell of roasted meat. Li Qingshan said, "All right, spare his life. The magnets on him are yours." The two brothers' eyes lit up, and they thanked him profusely. The pale-faced man said tentatively, "Fellow Taoist, this earth fiend magnetic formation is not easy to obtain. Why don't we guard it for a while longer? We are willing to give you half of the harvest." Li Qingshan glanced at him indifferently. "Then why should I give you half?" The pale-faced man said embarrassedly, "You are right, you are right." At this moment, Su Tong came forward and praised, "Fellow Taoist, you are brave and resourceful. No wonder you are not afraid of danger. I admire you." Li Qingshan said, "It's just a small matter. It's not worth mentioning. It may be a small matter for fellow Taoist, but for them, it's a matter of life and death." Su Tong waved her hand behind her. Most of the cultivators were still immersed in the tragic scene of burning a living person. When they came back to their senses, they thanked Li Qingshan one after another and carefully bypassed the charred figure. Zhu Yingkai hid in the crowd with a very complicated mood. Li Qingshan did not notice his existence at all. Li Qingshan picked up the metal basket on his back again and carried a basket of origin magnets in each hand, striding out of the mountain. A beautiful female cultivator accompanied him as over 100 cultivators followed behind him in a dense mass. It was rather like a leader inspecting them. The two brothers were left behind to guard half a basket of magnets. They looked at each other in dismay and became vigilant. Now, Li Qingshan was naturally the first champion of this assessment, and Su Tong was the second, so there was only the third. "Brother, we are just servants. With our cultivation, it's not difficult to be promoted from servants to servants. So, let's not hurt our friendship. Brother, what you said is reasonable. Then let me do it this time." The black-faced man grabbed the basket on his back fiercely. The pale-faced man held the other side tightly, and the basket was suspended in the air. "Brother, you are wrong. It has always been the elder brother who gives way to the younger brother. There is no reason for the younger brother to give way to the elder brother. The order of seniority. Half each. Just as the two brothers were arguing, Li Qingshan was about to walk out of the cave. The white light in front of him was getting brighter and brighter, and the moist sea breeze poured into the cave with a slightly salty smell. Chapter 1382. The huge, three-legged golden toad was lying on the beach, glowing with a golden light under the sun, which suddenly attracted everyone's attention. Li Qingshan opened his eyes wide and saw a familiar figure. It was the great princess who was sitting on the nine-colored deer. She looked back and nodded with a smile. She seemed to be in a good mood. Could it be that she came specifically for me? My charm is really hard to resist. Li Qingshan thought in a very narcissistic manner. He recalled the feeling of being watched and thought back to everything he had done in the Origin Magnetic Mountain in a hurry. He discovered he had not done anything outrageous, so he could not help but let out a sigh of relief. After all, he had received a good person card from others. Even he didn't want to disappoint those who had good intentions for him. In addition to her and Lu Tian, there were three strange men. Judging from their demeanor, they must be direct disciples with the cultivation of human sovereign realm. He didn't understand why a small entrance examination could attract so many big shots. Moreover, several people's eyes were almost all focused on him. This was not his illusion. Su Tong looked at him in amazement and thought, "Are these true disciples all here for him?" She involuntarily kept a distance from him and fell behind. This was a big misunderstanding. Li Qingshan was the focus of two bets at the same time. With his extraordinary performance, he won the appreciation of several direct disciples. Naturally, the gambler's eyes were full of meaning. With Li Qingshan in the lead, a group of people meandered to the beach and stood in front of the three-legged golden toad. Congratulations to everyone for passing the entrance examination and becoming a member of the Wanxiang sect. Lu Tian stood high on the back of the three-legged golden toad and opened his arms with a smile. "Now, please put the Yuan magnetic iron into the mouth of the three-legged golden toad." The toad opened its mouth with a thunderous sound. Li Qingshan was the first to step forward and put 3 baskets of Yuan magnetic iron into the mouth of the three-legged golden toad. Su Tong followed him closely. She saw Li Qingshan put down the basket, walk to the true disciples, and asked, "Why are you here?" Su Tong was more convinced of her guess. If it were not for the fact that there were people in the Wanxiang sect, how could they have such an attitude? Those people were all human emperors who had gone through 5 heavenly tribulations. Little did he know that this was Li Qingshan's personality, even when facing demon god Qiongqi. He was not willing to be subservient. The successor disciples were not surprised. Regardless of whether this lad was good or evil, he was by no means a coward. In particular, Ren Chuyo's eyes were filled with admiration. "I'm a little worried." Wan Yaozhu smiled. Her attitude was natural and peaceful. She seemed to be a little shy. She did not expect him to come over and talk to her like this. Li Qingshan was moved. Even if the world was difficult and evil people were everywhere, there would always be such a heart of gold. He sincerely said, "Thank you." Wan Yaozhu shook her head gently. "I'm just here to take a look." No one could tell that this was a conversation between two cultivators who were 2 realms apart. It was this feeling of equality that moved Li Qingshan. He thought, maybe the Kailan's strategy of longevity should be practiced by people like her. "I'll return it to you when I get the bookmark." The 9-colored deer was so proud that she could not hold back anymore. She generously said, "No, lad, we'll give you the sapphire bookmark." She now found Li Qingshan very pleasing to the eye. They had made a lot of money in this bet. As for the sapphire bookmark, it was just a small amount of money and was not worth her attention. Wan Yaozhu gently patted the nine-colored deer and said coquettishly, No, you must return it. Li Qingshan looked at Lu Tian. Senior brother Lu Tian, when can I get my bookmark? Since it's junior sister Ruan's debt, I'll pay you now. Lu Tian counted with his fingers and took out 3 sapphire bookmarks and 7 silver bookmarks. There was also a brass bookmark and a mystic wood bookmark. Only 3 bookmarks? Li Qingshan was surprised. He had risked his life in the Yuan Fused Mountain and earned a lot of Yuan Fused magnets, but he only got 2 sapphire bookmarks in the end. Isn't this too little? Could it be that Lu Tian is scamming me? Lu Tian smiled and said, What do you think? Rin Chuyu said, Lad, the sapphire bookmark is the highest grade bookmark in the nature sect. Do you think it's so easy to get it? Li Qingshan finally understood the preciousness of the sapphire bookmark. He looked at Wan Yaozhu deeply and thought, Damn it, I said to win people over with virtue, but I haven't succeeded even once. In the end, I had to use force. Now, I'm about to be won over by virtue. Wan Yaozhu looked down to avoid his burning gaze. She stretched out her hand and said, All right, give it back. Li Qingshan put the sapphire bookmark in her hand and said solemnly, You are a good person. Li Qingshan, where are you from? Lung Yuan suddenly asked with a solemn and scrutinizing expression. Li Qingshan's heart tightened. This was the question he didn't want to answer the most. He smiled and said, From a very, very far away place. May I know your name, fellow Taoist? Lung Yuan, I'm in charge of the security of the nature sect. Please answer my question truthfully. You don't dare to answer. You have a guilty conscience? Lung Yuan's eyes became even colder. Li Qingshan also said seriously, I'm sorry. This is my privacy. After I understand the rules of the nature sect, I will cooperate with senior martial brother within the scope of the sect's rules. The 9 provinces all had treasures like the Xieji's horn that could distinguish between truth and lies. The human world probably didn't lack such methods. Moreover, a lie must have a loophole. In the end, he had to use more lies to make up for it. Therefore, unless it was absolutely necessary, he would never lie. Lung Yuan was startled. He didn't expect to be rebuffed. Wan Yaozhu and Pai Yangqiu both smiled. Ren Aoyu even laughed. Lung Yuan, you've met your match. Boy, I admire you more and more. Lung Yuan said, I will keep an eye on you. Li Qingshan nodded and smiled. He didn't talk to Wan Yaozhu anymore. He turned around and walked back to the crowd. Su Tong and the other cultivators looked at him with admiration. A true disciple was a high and mighty figure. At this time, the 2 brothers also walked out of the mountain. Seeing this scene, they immediately gave up the idea of revenge. Instead, they were a little worried that Li Qingshan would hold a grudge. Soon, everyone's magnets fell into the 3-legged golden toad's mouth. Lu Tian announced the ranking of this assessment. First place, Li Qingshan. Second place, Su Tong. Third place, Nie Xiuwen. Nie Xiuwu was the fair-faced gentleman of the 2 brothers. Originally, he had exchanged the same amount of magnets as the dark-faced fiend, but in the end, he took out a grape-sized piece of magnets from his sleeve and beat his elder brother, Nie Xiuwen. At that time, his expression darkened even more. If it weren't for the true disciples holding the line, they would have started fighting on the spot. Pai Yangqiu said to Ren Aoyu, What did I say? Ren Aoyu snorted. Did you win? Pai Yangqiu smiled. You can say I won. For a gambler, besides the result, winning or losing is also very important. Everyone boarded the big ship. However, Lu Tian stopped Li Qingshan. Congratulations, junior brother Li. You became a true disciple as soon as you entered the sect. He smiled like an old fox staring at a big rooster. Li Qingshan clearly felt a sense of malice. He said bluntly, "What do you want, senior brother?" Lu Tian said, "Junior brother, you're indeed a straightforward person. I don't have any other hobbies, but I like gambling. I'm especially optimistic about junior brother's gambling nature, so I'd like to make a bet with you." Ren Aoyao and the other two seemed to have already expected it. They all showed a look of interest. Wan Yaozhu frowned. "Senior brother," Lu Tian said, "Junior sister, you can't blame me for making a bet during the entrance examination. However, this is a private bet between me and junior brother Li. It has nothing to do with you." Wan Yaozhu could only look at Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan really didn't want to disappoint her, but he was really curious about the contents of the bet. "Sai, I've never liked gambling, but since senior brother Lu has spoken, I can't just ignore it. May I ask, what do you want to bet?" Lu Tian's smile became even wider. "You're not far from becoming a chamber disciple. One more step, and you'll become a true disciple. Why don't we bet on when you can become a true disciple?" "Oh, how long do you think it will take for me to become a true disciple?" Chapter 1383. Lu Tian's mask-like smile made him look like a well-tempered casino owner. The innocent Li Qingshan, who looked like a teenager, was the standard ignorant teenager in the story who was walking on a path of no return. He even blinked his eyes seriously. "Senior brother Lu, since it's a bet, we should have a target." "Yes, 10 years it is." Hearing this, Li Qingshan didn't react, but the other true disciples all had different expressions. Wan Yaozhu said angrily, "Senior brother Lu, I can't just ignore you bullying people like this." Others might not know, but as a true disciple, she knew very well how difficult it was to become a true disciple of the Myriad Phenomenon sect. In theory, as long as one had enough merits, even if one's cultivation wasn't high enough, they could still slowly become a true disciple. However, if one wasn't a human sovereign who had undergone 5 heavenly tribulations, it was very difficult to accumulate merits. A human sovereign completing 1 or 2 important tasks might earn more merits than a nascent soul cultivator could accumulate in 10 years. Unless Li Qingshan could quickly undergo 5 heavenly tribulations, but he was only at the 3rd heavenly tribulation. Becoming a human sovereign within 10 years was simply a pipe dream. Ren Aoyao also said with a smile, "Hey, Lu Tian, this bet is a bit too much. It's not your usual style." Lu Tian was known for his love of gambling, and he won more than he lost. The reason why other people were willing to gamble with him was because he was always very fair. He would never resort to trickery and trickery. Even if the loser was not convinced, they would still find a way to get back at him instead of never gambling with him again. Taking advantage of Li Qingshan's ignorance of the Myriad sect and making a completely unfair bet was definitely not his style of doing things. "It's just a joke." Lu Tian scratched his head. "I don't know why, but even if it's 10 years, I still feel a little uneasy. Senior brother, you think too highly of me. Please forgive me for not accepting such a bet." Li Qingshan said seriously. He seemed a little dissatisfied, but he was inwardly rejoicing. He was already considering whether or not to bet with Lu Tian. Although he didn't know much about the Myriad Phenomenon sect, he knew that the so-called true disciples were those who had gone through 5 heavenly tribulations. It wasn't that he didn't have any confidence that he could survive 5 heavenly tribulations in 10 years. Right now, he was only half a step away from the 4th heavenly tribulation. If he cultivated the ape-demon transformation to the 5th layer, he would be able to immediately restore the ox, tiger, turtle, and phoenix transformations to the 5th layer. He reckoned that he would not be far from the fifth heavenly tribulation. Okay, I was just joking. Lution hurriedly said. Then 50 years it is. With your talent, you should have a high chance of success in 50 years. However, most nascent soul cultivators couldn't overcome the fifth, or even the fourth heavenly tribulation in 500 years. They were forever stuck at the bottleneck until they died. Otherwise, they would have been turned into ashes by the tribulation lightning. But based on Li Qingshan's performance in the Origin Magnetic Mountain, this time limit could already be considered fair. Li Qingshan was absolutely willing, based on the current situation. If he couldn't survive 5 heavenly tribulations in 50 years, he might as well buy a piece of tofu and kill himself. What was the point of ascending to the 9 heavens and fighting Qiongqi? But the expression on his face was very hesitant, as if he had considered it carefully. He bowed and said, I'm sorry, Senior Brother Lu. I still don't think gambling is very good. After saying that, he walked toward the ship. Wan Yaozhu smiled. Not all men were like Lu Tian. Lu Tian was a little surprised. Based on his understanding of Li Qingshan, with 50 years, Li Qingshan would bet with him no matter what. But he actually refused. He blocked Li Qingshan's path and sized him up. What do you want? Do you want to extend the time limit? You should know that even for people like us, 50 years is very long. If the progress of the gamble is too slow, it will be very boring. I can increase the odds. Li Qingshan sighed and said, but I don't have anything to bet. Lu Tian immediately said, I can lend it to you. How could a casino owner not lend money? Li Qingshan sighed again. Sigh, it's so long. I can't stand the interest. You little brat, so you want me to lend it to you for free? If you die during the tribulation, who will I ask for compensation? It's gambling, so it's inevitable to take some risks. I agree with what Senior Brother Lu said. If the gamble is too long, it will inevitably be boring. I also don't want to increase the odds and take advantage of you. How about this? Li Qingshan smiled and said, 30 years, 1-to-1. He had cut the 50 years limit by nearly half. Such confidence, or rather, arrogance, made the few true disciples look at him. In a mere 30 years, a disciple had become a successor disciple. There had never been such an example in the history of the Myriad Nature sect. In comparison, it was easier to cultivate a nascent soul to a young spirit. But even a peerless genius would need the support of a large amount of resources and hard work to have a chance. During this process, there would be absolutely no time and energy to complete the sect's tasks. Wan Yaozhu wanted to persuade him, but when she saw Li Qingshan's high-spirited appearance and thought of all the things in the Yuan-fused mountain, she bit her lip and shook her head gently. Ren Aoyo smiled and said, Kid, I think I'm crazy enough, but I didn't expect you to be even crazier. Do you know how much risk there is in this? Li Qingshan also smiled and said, Even if I lose, I won't lose my life. It's not a risk, and getting some resources in advance is always beneficial to my cultivation. Of course, it's better if Senior Brother Lu is willing to lend it to me. Pai Yangqiu couldn't help clapping his hands and said, Beautiful! With that, he had turned the tables on Lu Tian. If Lu Tian was only willing to lend a very small number of green jade lots, it would be nothing to someone like Li Qingshan in a few decades. If he borrowed a lot, then he could immediately convert it into a large amount of resources and quickly improve his cultivation. Even if he lost in the end, it might not be a loss. In a situation where he had an absolute advantage, if Lu Tian didn't dare to gamble, then he would lose face. So now he had to lend it to him, even if he didn't want to. The smile on Lu Tian's face became even wider, and his narrowed eyes flashed with sharpness. How much do you want to bet? This kid is indeed worthy of being the gambler that I like. Unknowingly, The gambling had already begun. If he wanted to regain the upper hand, he had to raise the stakes of this round to a level that would make his opponent fearful. He had to crush his opponent's psychological defenses and make him waver. This was the most common and useful trick in gambling, and as a human sovereign, he had an absolute advantage in this aspect. Li Qingshan said, "How much do you dare to borrow?" At this time, even the calm and stern Lung Yuan was moved. He realized that this joking gambling would probably turn into a shocking gamble. Lu Tian also didn't expect this. He had originally lost to Li Qingshan and couldn't help but want to get back at him. He didn't expect that he would be forced to do so by Li Qingshan. The handsome man in front of him was no longer a small gambling stake for them to gamble with. Instead, he was the gambler standing on the opposite side of the gambling table, sitting on the same level as him, and even looking at him condescendingly. "If you have the guts to lend me, I will dare to bet with you. Come, let me test your guts." "Interesting, this is really interesting." Lu Tian laughed heartily, and he even started dancing with joy. He seemed extremely delighted. Li Qingshan stood with his arms crossed, and Lu Tian's face suddenly approached him. He raised a finger and said, 1,000. Wang Yaozhu was stunned. She had won against Lu Tian, and the other three almost at the same time, but the green jade lots she had won were still less than 1,000. Even for a true disciple, a green jade lot was very precious, not to mention that Li Qingshan was just a nascent soul cultivator. Li Qingshan stretched out his hand and said, "Give it to me. If you lose, you have to pay 2,000 on the spot. Otherwise." Lu Tian used his finger to lightly draw a line on his neck. "No one can owe me a gambling debt." Li Qingshan grinned and said, "If I don't pay, I will be at your mercy." Mosquitoes don't bite when there are too many of them. There was no need to worry when one had too many debts. 2,000 green jade lots might be a terrifying number to others, but to Li Qingshan, it was just not enough. It was not that he was really confident that he could become a true disciple of the Myriad Phenomenon sect in 30 years. Until now, he knew very little about the rules of the Myriad Phenomenon sect. However, according to Luo Ho Xiaoming's calculations, the 500-year agreement between him and demon god Qiongqi was about the same time limit in the human realm. Either he defeated demon god Qiongqi, then he would not have to worry even if he lost the bet, or he was defeated by demon god Qiongqi. What kind of bullshit is senior brother Lu Tian? If you have the guts, come to Qingqi Mountain and find me, you bastard. Ha! Even the Myriad Phenomenon sect master did not have the guts to do that. It could be said that this bet was a great help to him in his bet with demon god Qiongqi. It was not that Lu Tian was stupid, but that Li Qingshan was clever. Who would have thought a measly soul nascent cultivator would actually become involved with a demon god? And he was even saddled with a bet that was basically impossible for him to win. Therefore, people should have great ambitions, even if it would bring them great trouble. However, when you have a big trouble, a small trouble is no trouble. If you can solve a big trouble, a small trouble is nothing. If you can solve a big trouble, a small trouble is also nothing. Lu Tian patted the three-legged golden toad, and it spat out 1,000 green jade lots. He handed them to Li Qingshan personally, looking at Li Qingshan, who was happily counting the green jade lots, as if he had already won the bet and was counting how much he had won. He suddenly felt a little guilty. As a gambler, he knew how scary this feeling was, but at the same time, he became more and more excited. A gamble that could not make people feel this way was not a gamble at all. It was just a boring game. Li Qingshan counted the green jade lots carefully twice and asked Wang Yaozhu to help identify if there were any fake notes in them. Only then did he put the green jade lots into his sumeru ring with satisfaction. Lu Wuyo knows his destiny, gambling with life and death. Lu Tian sang loudly and returned to the three-legged golden toad's back. With a croak, the golden toad jumped into the sea. Ha ha ha, kid, I hope you can win. Ren Chuyu laughed 3 times and flew away. You're on your own, Lang Yuan warned and left as well. Pai Yangqiu went up and patted Li Qingshan's shoulder. We will meet again. In the blink of an eye, only Li Qingshan, Wan Yaozhu, and the 9-colored deer were left on the beach. Wan Yaozhu scolded, You shouldn't have gambled. Li Qingshan shrugged his shoulders. I already did. Men. Wan Yaozhu sighed slightly. It will take a long time to get to the nature sect by boat. I will give you a ride. Chapter 1384. Li Qingshan couldn't help but look at the only mount here. If he could ride with her, it would be very good. The 9-colored deer was furious. It shook its head as if it wanted to use its horn to attack him. Don't even think about it. Li Qingshan originally didn't really want to ride her, but after hearing this, he actually wanted to, but of course, it was impossible now. In any case, the other party's realm was much higher than his. If they really fought, he might not be her opponent. Moreover, riding a deer depends on its master. Wan Yaozhu smiled. I'll lead the way. I'll fly you there. It's faster than taking a boat. Thank you very much. Li Qingshan clasped his hands and smiled. I also had a mount, but I came out in a hurry and didn't bring it. The 9-colored deer raised its head. What kind of beast is it? Li Qingshan smiled. It's not a beast, it's a bird, a phoenix. The 9-colored deer was stunned for a moment, then laughed without caring about her image. If she was in human form, she might be rolling around with laughter. Phoenix, ha ha, you brat, you really know how to brag. As the king of birds, the phoenix's bloodline was naturally more sacred and noble than the 9-colored deer's. However, this kind of bird had always been known for its noble temperament. Even immortals might not be able to subdue it as a mount, let alone such a small nascent soul cultivator, and a stinky man at that. Li Qingshan smiled and sighed. I originally had a cow, but unfortunately I lost it. Wan Yaozhu suddenly noticed that when he said this, although there was a smile on his face, his eyes were a bit strange. It was as if he was sighing and full of hope. At this time, the big boat had already set sail. She said, Let's go too. The 9-colored deer lightly leaped into the air and said sarcastically, Li Qingshan, I hope I can see your phoenix mount soon. Let me see which phoenix is so blind. Li Qingshan followed closely behind and smiled. There will be a chance in the future. Achoo! In a corner of the 3,000 worlds, a blind phoenix sneezed again. Flying over the boundless sea, the curtain of night shrouded the land. The stars were bright, the moon was like a hook, and the clouds were pure white and translucent. Li Qingshan wanted to ask Wan Yaozhu about the situation of the Wanxiang sect, but he found that he couldn't get a word in. Wan Yaozhu criticized him for gambling with Lu Tian and split the topic into 2 clues, Lu Tian and gambling. First, she talked about the various dangers of gambling and gave a series of clear and profound examples. Then, she talked about Lu Tian's reputation in the Wanxiang sect and how good he was at gambling. In the end, he combined the 2 topics and once again told him that he shouldn't gamble, let alone gamble with Lu Tian. The entire process was well-reasoned and filled with clear examples. She spoke tirelessly and sincerely. Probably even seasoned gamblers would realize their mistakes and turn over a new leaf if they heard this. Only then did Li Qingshan discover that she was actually so talkative despite her quietness and dullness. He studied her face with interest. Are you listening or not? Guan Yaozhu said angrily. Clearly, not only was she not dull, she had a sharp mind. Li Qingshan hurriedly said, "Of course I'm listening. Do you want me to recite it?" "There's no need," Guan Yaozhu said in a bad mood. "Don't be angry. Gambling has many disadvantages. Although gambling has many disadvantages, didn't you also win a bet this time? Furthermore, you got something without risking anything." Guan Yaozhu didn't hide the fact that Lu Tian and the others gambled. She didn't even hide the fact that she won a lot of green jade, lots, in the end. She wanted to use this to incite Li Qingshan's hatred for gambling. However, Li Qingshan was grateful for her trust and sincerity, so he wasn't angry about being used as a gambling tool. In the end, he helped her win a round. Otherwise, wouldn't that fellow Lu Tian be proud of himself? Guan Yaozhu said seriously, "The outcome of gambling doesn't lie in the outcome of a single round. Rather, if you win, you will continue to gamble until you lose everything you've won in the past. The path of cultivation lies in accumulation. This kind of thinking of taking shortcuts is already close to the evil path, and it will ultimately affect your entire cultivation." What you said makes sense. Li Qingshan couldn't help but admire her insight. However, in life, there will always be times when you have no choice but to gamble. If you don't gamble, you won't be able to advance. Not to mention losing everything you've won. Even if you lose your life, you won't hesitate. You were once a noble princess who was doted on by countless people. You also entered a large sect like the Myriad Appearance sect, and you even survived 5 heavenly tribulations in such a short period of time to become a true disciple. Not everyone in this world has your luck and talent. Guan Yaozhu was silent for a moment, then sighed. "You're right. I'm luckier than most people. I don't know what you've experienced in the past, but you've already reached this step. You're about to join the Myriad Appearance sect as a formal disciple, and you have a high chance of becoming a true disciple. Why can't you relax and gamble?" However, Li Qingshan smiled. "If you knew how I got to this step, you wouldn't have advised me to relax. However, you're right about one thing. Once gambling starts, it can't be stopped. If you can't win in the end, then lose everything." Guan Yaozhu pitifully said, "Don't you feel that living like this is hard?" Li Qingshan said, "Although it's hard, it's also interesting." Guan Yaozhu blinked, wanting to say something, but hesitating. In the end, she still said, "You're a good person. I hope you can win in the end." Li Qingshan said, "I'll be counting on your auspicious words." We're almost at the Myriad Appearance sect. The 9-colored deer flew through the sea of clouds, and Li Qingshan followed it down. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. On the distant sea surface, there was a bright ball of fire burning, illuminating the dark clouds that shrouded the night like a mirage. As they approached the ball of fire, the 9-colored deer lowered its altitude. It was almost like it was galloping on the surface of the sea, stepping on the waves to advance, quickly skimming over the sea surface. Li Qingshan gradually saw the true appearance of the ball of fire, but he was a little doubtful of his eyes. This was because it wasn't an ethereal and quiet celestial mountain or spiritual island like he had imagined, but a glorious metropolis. Buildings rose from the ground one after another, but they were also full of carved beams and painted rafters, with arched eaves and corners. Everywhere, there were gardens, flowers, and trees, like a classical garden that had changed from a flat surface to a three-dimensional one. The buildings were connected by long bridges. Below the bridges, there were winding rivers and continuous lakes like a pearl necklace. Suddenly, it turned into a waterfall that poured down hundreds of feet, like a jade dragon leaping, and the sound of the waves could be heard for hundreds of miles. It was more spectacular and incredible than any city he had seen in his previous life. On the top of the mountain in the center of the island, there was a tall building that was thousands of feet tall. In its majesty, it also had the power to soar into the clouds. The top of the building had indeed sunk into the clouds, and all the buildings surrounded it like stars surrounding the moon. Chapter 1385. Drizzles of rain fell from the dark clouds, making the air even more moist and cool. The dense spirit chi made people feel relaxed and relaxed. Even breathing became much easier. Plus or minus, the 9-colored deer slowed down and trod on the magnificent stone bridge that spanned thousands of meters and was hundreds of meters wide, arriving at Wanxiang City. A huge waterfall flowed down from both sides of the bridge and into the deep, gloomy valley. Perhaps because it was already late at night, there was no one on the stone bridge. From afar, the city looked extremely glorious, but it was instead a bit quiet amidst the rumbling of the waterfall. Even though Li Qingshan didn't know much about the qi observation technique, he could feel the condensation of qi that reached extremely high into the sky. This wasn't a city for mortals, but a sacred land for cultivators. I'll send you off here. You should know the rest of the process. Once you've obtained the identity of a formal disciple, you can come to my 100-herb garden to take a look. I might be able to give you a job there. 100-herb garden. Li Qingshan nodded to show that he remembered. He watched as Wan Yaozhu left on the deer and stepped into Wanxiang City alone. The terrain of the city was extremely complicated, twisting and turning like a maze. Sometimes he passed through corridors and gardens, sometimes he went down bridges. Since he couldn't fly, Li Qingshan had to rely on the spirit turtle's powerful divination ability to find the path to the sky. On the way, he encountered a few patrolling teams of guards. Li Qingshan suspected that they were Long Yuan's subordinates, so he carefully avoided them to avoid unnecessary trouble. He didn't want to go to the sky, as he didn't have the qualifications yet. Only formal disciples had the right to enter the sacred land of the Wanxiang sect, and formal disciples happened to be the lowest limit. So you're Li Qingshan, the first place of this year's entrance examination. Why are you here so early? In the cold and empty hall, the cultivator in charge of welcoming had an equally cold expression. It was obvious that Li Qingshan's sudden arrival had disrupted some of his arrangements. After confirming Li Qingshan's name, he became a bit warmer. Although there were many formal disciples in the Wanxiang sect, they still had some status. However, he still had some status. Even if he met a successor disciple, he would still address him as a junior brother. As for this guide, his status in the Wanxiang sect was only that of a disciple who had just entered the sect. Li Qingshan said, "Senior brother Letian wants to make a bet with me, so he urged me to hurry over." I see. A hint of a smile appeared on the male cultivator's face. There seemed to be some pity in his eyes as he said, "You haven't even joined the sect yet you dare to make a bet with senior brother Lu Tian. How dare you?" He did not even ask what the stakes were, seemingly certain that Li Qingshan would lose. Besides, he was just a nascent soul cultivator. How big could the stakes be? He was just being toyed with by senior brother Lu Tian. Instead, he talked about Lu Tian's strange stories. Every time he gambled, Lu Tian would win. His opponents included human immortals and ghost immortals. Among them was the name of one gambler, Even Li Qingshan felt that it was like a thunderclap piercing his ears. It's said that senior brother Li Shan's lifespan was already at its end. He made a bet with one of the 10 great marshals of the netherworld, Oxhead Obian, beside the Yellow Springs Road, and won 300 years of lifespan. Oxhead Obian? Oxhead Horseface. Li Qingshan's eyes widened. This sounded way too familiar. Ha, you've finally heard of this. You're not too ill-informed. There's no helping it. We cultivators are not as famous among mortals as the gods of the netherworld and netherworld. Black and white impermanence, Oxhead Horseface, 10 kings of hell, Li Qingshan muttered to himself about these famous figures. His heart pounded. He suddenly realized that he had indeed stepped into a world of immortals and Buddhas. Although he was still very far away from the 9 heavens, he was clearly very close. However, it was clear that he was already very close. The distance between him and these famous figures was already within reach. Perhaps he would meet them by chance very soon. From the looks of it, did you ascend from the netherworld? As the guide spoke, he began his work in an orderly manner. Sometimes he would bury his head and write furiously, and at other times he would pass a document to Li Qingshan for him to fill it out. Li Qingshan had too many secrets. He had to deal with some parts vaguely or even leave them blank. He originally thought that there would be trouble. However, he realized that the guide did not even look at them. You don't have to find it strange. These are not for me to see. Just fill them in casually. If you really don't want to fill them, you can leave them blank. Then who are they for? Are they just for archiving? After Spirit Venerable Guihai looks through them, these documents will be destroyed. Everything about you will naturally be left in Spirit Venerable Guihai's sea of consciousness. Who is Spirit Venerable Guihai? Li Qingshan was a little surprised. This Spirit Venerable Guihai was too bored. Through his observation, there were at least hundreds of thousands of people in Myriad Phenomenon City. You really know nothing about the Myriad Phenomenon sect. You actually don't even know about Spirit Venerable Guihai. It's my first time here. Please enlighten me, senior brother. Li Qingshan handed over a brass lot. The guide looked at the brass lot and then at him. He said with a smile, as expected of the first in the test, "You sure are generous. However, forget it this time. It wasn't easy for you to dig out those essence magnets. Leave them for bribing those fellows from the Heavenly Abode Department." "Thank you, senior brother." Li Qingshan sighed, inwardly. Indeed, there were still good people. It's not a big deal. I'll tell you if you want to hear it. Spirit Venerable Guihai is a spirit immortal who has transcended 6 heavenly tribulations. He is our grand sect master's mount and has an extremely high status in our sect. He is on equal footing with the 2 sect masters. It can be said that he's an invisible sect master who guards heaven all year round. When you reach heaven, you will naturally see him. However, you have to be careful. Spirit Venerable Guihai is a natural god. His knowledge is as deep as the sea. No one in the sect can compare to him. He knows everything in the world. Furthermore, he's extremely talented. He's best at divination and avoiding calamity. Some of your information may be true, some may be false, some may be false. I can't understand it, nor can I be bothered to understand it. However, in Spirit Venerable Guihai's eyes, he can see everything clearly. Li Qingshan's heart stirred. "Senior brother, may I ask what race Spirit Venerable Guihai is?" "Spirit Turtle." Li Qingshan thought to himself that he had indeed encountered someone from the same race. This wasn't much of a coincidence. There weren't many races that were natural gods to begin with. There were even fewer of them that formed a race. For example, the three-legged golden toad, and the nine-colored deer. Although their bloodlines were inferior to the phoenixes and spirit turtles, they were even rarer in numbers. After coming to the human realm, he encountered them. He didn't feel any joy from meeting someone from the same race. Instead, he was somewhat worried. It was difficult for him to estimate how powerful a spirit turtle that had transcended 6 heavenly tribulations and possessed a complete bloodline would have. This spirit turtle seemed to have a very rich reserve of knowledge and a master with the cultivation of a perfected immortal. His vague wording in the information would probably be seen through at a glance. Even if he left some blank space, it was possible for him to deduce a lot of information. However, it would be too obvious if he changed it now. Furthermore, he wouldn't be able to hide it when they met face to face. This was probably the greatest danger he had encountered since coming to the human realm. Once something went wrong, he would have no means of resisting. It was far more terrifying than the Essence Magnetic Mountain and the Earth-baneful beasts. Perhaps from the moment he entered Myriad Phenomenon City, Spirit Venerable Guihai had been watching him. However, this was also a major opportunity to find the sinkhole. Spirit Venerable Guihai definitely knew how to enter the sinkhole, and might even understand the prisoner of the sinkhole. Chapter 1386. However, as Wan Yaozhu had said, once the game started, he couldn't stop until he won or lost his life. He could choose what to bet, but he couldn't choose not to bet. When he walked out of the cold hall, it was still drizzling, and the majestic sky was not far from him. There was a small badge in his palm, which was shaped like a cloud. It recorded everything about him, including his identity, status, and achievements. With this badge, he could enter many places in the nature sect freely and receive the benefits of a disciple who had entered the hall. He held the badge tightly and walked to the sky. He hoped that the guide cultivator was telling the truth. Junior Brother Lee, you don't need to worry too much. Except for the things related to the sky, Spirit Venerable Guihai rarely interferes with the sex affairs. Even if you were a heinous demon, the Spirit Venerable wouldn't take a second look at you. But you don't look like one. Li Qingshan answered with a smile. If it was so easy to see through a demon, he wouldn't be a demon. He just hoped that Spirit Venerable Guihai would be deceived by his harmless appearance, and everyone would live in peace, even if he couldn't find any clues to enter the ultimate. After climbing hundreds of steps and stepping through the gate, the badge in front of his chest flashed slightly, and an invisible barrier opened for him. I'm afraid all the books in the world are here. As soon as he entered the building, he sighed from the bottom of his heart. Just the bottom floor had millions of books piling up into mountains of books. It was a dazzling sight. Before he could even take a closer look, a refined female cultivator came up to him. May I ask if you're Li Qingshan? I am. May I ask who you are? Li Qingshan saw that the badge on her chest was slightly different from his. She was a disciple who had entered the hall. The Spirit Venerable has been waiting for a long time. He asked me to take you upstairs. The female cultivator examined Li Qingshan with a strange look. She had worked in the hall for many years, but she had never seen such a face. Otherwise, she would have had an impression of him. So, he must be a new disciple who had entered the hall not long ago. Since he was received by the Spirit Venerable in person, he must have some background. Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. What he feared would come true. The old tortoise had indeed noticed him, but there was no turning back. He maintained his composure and cupped his hands. Senior sister, please lead the way. Following the spiral staircase up layer by layer, by the time he reached the 6th floor, Li Qingshan's identity as a disciple was no longer sufficient, but the invisible barrier of the array still opened layer by layer for him. Then, it silently closed behind him. Once the worst happened, he would not be able to escape unscathed. Even without this sky, if a demonic immortal wanted to deal with him, it would be as easy as killing an ant. Along the way, he could not be bothered with admiring the various sights in the sky. He circulated the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression as hard as he could, repeatedly predicting the omens in his head, but he received no results at all. It was like a flying insect colliding against glass time and time again. After trying a few times, he gave up. Back then, his spirit turtle's method of sea suppression had only reached a rudimentary level, and it had already rendered the divination of a grandmaster of the school of yin-yang ineffective, let alone when he faced a true spirit turtle right now. With a cultivation of 6 heavenly tribulations, the invisible barrier of fate set down was not something he could break through right now. Before the results were revealed, fate was impossible to know. He just wondered whether the spirit sovereign of the seas had seen through the truth of fate or not. Or was it because he was already involved in a huge dispute that involved many important figures above the 9 heavens? This old turtle obviously couldn't understand it. However, not being able to understand it is the most troublesome. However, I sense the shadow of calamity from you. Li Qingshan said, "Blessings are accompanied by calamities, and calamities are accompanied by blessings." Spirit Sovereign Guihai was unmoved as he said coldly, "Put down the badge and leave. Never return. Pretend you never came here. It has nothing to do with the Myriad Phenomenon sect. Perhaps one day the Myriad Phenomenon sect will need my care. Even if it's to seek fortune and avoid calamity, why not keep me under your watch? Everything is under your control. If there's a day when I harm the Myriad Phenomenon sect, and Senior feels that killing me is better than keeping me alive, you can do so at any time. If others were to hear that, they would laugh their heads off." Spirit Venerable Guihai also smiled, faintly. "My master lives above the 9 heavens and is in charge of Emperor Vast Heaven's study. He transcends the 6 realms and is not part of the 5 elements. He has also attended the Buddhist ancestors' Yulenpen assembly and heard of the Tao ancestors' primordial chaos Tao fruit. He only greets the 18 arhats and is on equal footing with the 10 Yama kings. All he befriends are immortals. Kid, you actually said that you want to take care of the Myriad Phenomenon sect. What a joke." Li Qingshan said, "Even immortals need people to do it. Who can predict what will happen in the future? Furthermore, the sea doesn't stop a trickle from flowing. Given how impressive the Myriad Phenomenon sect is, doesn't it still need to recruit disciples? I'm not talented, but I will definitely make some contributions." Spirit Venerable Guihai pondered for a long time. Even with his deduction abilities, he found it difficult to make a decision. Although this kid's cultivation level wasn't high, he was of great importance. He did not know who had planted this chess piece. Before there were obvious benefits and disadvantages, he was absolutely unwilling to make a move. However, it was precisely because of the importance that he was unwilling to keep him here. Otherwise, even if a demon emperor wanted to join the Myriad Phenomenon sect, it wouldn't be so troublesome. Be it deduction or prophecy, it was ultimately impossible to predict everything in the world. Otherwise, the spirit turtle race wouldn't need to hide in the deep sea. At this moment, he needed to be cautious. "All right, you can stay." Li Qingshan's calm expression gradually melted as he revealed a smile. An indescribable joy rose in his heart. In this battle with the demon immortal, he had won another round. He knew very well how difficult it was to change a spirit turtle's mind. No matter how confident he was, he had to risk his life. Now that he had passed another round, he was taking another step forward. Fighting with the heavens, fighting with the earth, and fighting with humans was an endless joy. A great man would never lie to me. Spirit Venerable Guihai suddenly asked, "What cultivation technique do you cultivate?" This was another crucial question. Li Qingshan naturally wouldn't reveal the 9 transformations of the demons and gods. He said frankly, the Extreme Emperor's record of world destruction, also known as the Extreme Emperor's record of the world. I'm willing to offer it to the heavens. Hand it over. Yes. Li Qingshan recorded the cultivation technique into a jade slip and handed it over with both hands. Spirit Venerable Guihai seemed to have only probed it slightly before taking a deep look at Li Qingshan. What an interesting cultivation technique. It has given me some inspiration. I can perfect another heavenly book. The badge on Li Qingshan's chest flashed slightly as he gained a considerable contribution. Following that, he received an equally considerable bookmark. He understood that this was Spirit Venerable Guihai's main job in guarding this heaven. He had to collect all sorts of cultivation techniques and constantly perfect the myriad phenomenon heavenly book. He couldn't help but be delighted. He knew quite a number of cultivation techniques. There was still a world behind him. If he could offer all these cultivation techniques, wouldn't he be promoted to a legacy disciple in minutes? He immediately offered up the Demon Suppression Statuary and the Demon War Statuary. Spirit Venerable Guihai took a look, but said, "The cultivation techniques of the fighting fiend race have been gathered in this heaven. This Demon Suppression Statuary is rather interesting, but its value isn't high." This time, Li Qingshan only obtained a few mystic wood bookmarks. The contribution points were pitifully low. He might as well have dug out a few essence magnets. This heaven had stood for countless years. Above, it was a perfected immortal grand sect master. Below, it was Spirit Venerable Guihai's incessant inference. Below, it was the accumulated contribution points of past disciples. Ordinary cultivation technique books were no longer of any value. They had to be extraordinary, or they had to be very powerful and brilliant. The Extreme Emperor's record of world destruction was a powerful cultivation technique to begin with. Furthermore, it was brewed during the destruction of the world. It had greater value when compared to the original Extreme Emperor's record of the world. Chapter 1388. Senior, may I ask, if I want to read the heavenly book, which level should I go to? What's the price? Li Qingshan had already decided to strengthen the human cultivation method as an important part of increasing his own strength, and this heavenly mountain was exactly what he needed the most right now. The heavenly book needs to be exchanged with bookmarks. Do you have any? Thank you, Senior Brother Lutian, for lending me so many green jade lots. Li Qingshan smiled. It seemed like this old turtle didn't know everything. Prophecy and divination weren't omniscient. Spirit Venerable Guihai closed his eyes and concentrated for a moment. When he opened his eyes again, there was a clear light in them. I see. What a big gamble. What a big investment. I have a heavenly book here that is suitable for you. Li Qingshan asked, "What arcane book?" "Unfettered heavenly scripture. Unfettered sutra." Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. According to what Luo Ho Xiaoming had said, the Extreme King's records of the world and the Extreme King's records of world destruction contained the will and path of the Mahesvara Demon Lord. Could it be that this Book of Freedom corresponded to it? Not bad. Coincidentally, the cultivation technique that you contributed gave me some inspiration and helped me perfect this heavenly tome. Senior, please introduce the contents of this heavenly book. For example, what realm can one cultivate it to? Li Qingshan humbly asked for guidance, greatly impressed by Spirit Emperor Guihai. In other words, in such a short time, Spirit Emperor Guihai had thoroughly understood the Extreme King's records of the world and the Extreme King's records of world destruction. He had also perfected the Book of Freedom. This kind of deduction ability was simply insane. For so many years, he had only cultivated the records of the extreme king's world destruction. It was already difficult for him to combine the two techniques, let alone combine them. Now that he had a better and more complete technique in front of him, he couldn't help but feel that coming to the Wanxiang sect was the right decision. Your cultivation technique is known as the ultimate emperor. Thus, this heavenly book could be considered to be at the extreme immortal realm and could reach the extreme immortal realm. Although I can't deduce a higher realm, I can definitely have greater development. The Mahasvara heavenly demon master resided at the top of the world of lust, and because he had attained Mahasvara, he was known as the Lord of 3,000 worlds, being both good and evil at the same time, being both a god and a devil, combining life and death into one to attain the realm of great freedom. Of course, this unfettered heavenly tome alone won't be enough to obtain great freedom. To be precise, it's only minor freedom at most, but it's already very rare. The great freedom heavenly demon master's path isn't just his path. It's also one of the 3,000 great Das. Not only does it suit your temperament, but it also suits your current cultivation at the same time. At the very least, it won't cause your current cultivation to go to waste. Do you want it? Li Qingshan replied without hesitation. Of course I do. Bring me 850 green jade lots. So expensive. Li Qingshan grinned. This was daylight robbery. The bookmarks he had obtained from the Extreme Emperor's record of world destruction, and the Extreme Emperor's record of the world didn't even amount to a fraction of what he had obtained. Was this old bastard trying to mess with him? Cultivation methods are the foundation of cultivation. Do you think it's that easy to obtain a set of cultivation methods? That makes sense. 850 it is. Li Qingshan thought about his own 9 transformations of demons and gods, and little N's path of white bone and great beauty. He had to admit this. A set of powerful and suitable cultivation methods could only be obtained with great fortuitous encounters. It was already fortunate that he could directly exchange for it. Everyone knew the price of the heavenly tome in the myriad phenomenon sect. Spirit Sovereign Guihai was in charge of the sect, so he probably wouldn't scam him in such a place. Thus, he obediently took out 850 green jade lots. Spirit Sovereign Guihai casually accepted it and gave him a jade scroll. Li Qingshan skimmed through it. He found it profound and indescribable. As he comprehended it further, all sorts of illusions appeared in front of him. Sometimes it was the vast starry sky, sometimes it was corpses and blood, sometimes it was the horrifying tragedy of the destruction of the world, sometimes it was the youthful vigor of saving the world, all sorts of illusions condensed into images of gods and demons. Some were gentle, some were terrifying, some were dancing kings, some were beast lords. For a moment, it was as if a group of demons were dancing wildly, shaking his mind. He could not help but want to dance with them. There was an unparalleled joy in his chest that kept expanding, almost bursting out of his limbs and bones, rising beyond the clouds and filling up the entire world. Spirit Sovereign Guihai silently observed Li Qingshan. He did not remind him how dangerous it was for him to casually read the entire Heavenly Tome of Freedom at his current cultivation level. The Heavenly Tome of Freedom was probably the most dangerous and unfathomable of the myriad phenomenon Heavenly Tome. It was the one that could easily cause one to go berserk. It was filled with contradictions and arguments, chaos and impermanence. If one was careful and cautious, fearful and hesitant, it would be difficult for one to be free. If one were to laugh in joy and dance with it, one would definitely fall into madness and confusion. Even though he had spent a lot of effort to complete the derivation, it was only a prototype. The path of the great freedom demon Lord was not something anyone could walk. However, ever since Li Qingshan started cultivating, The battle between gods and demons in his heart had never stopped. The ferocity of the tiger demon made him bloodthirsty and warlike. He liked the freedom of the ape demon the most, but he could not destroy the benevolence of the Qilin. Layers of demonic thoughts and divinity were constantly fighting and pulling at each other. He was once known as the Hero King. He used novels to spread martial arts and wanted to make all living beings equal. He was once kind and wanted to save the world. However, he did not hesitate to destroy the world to fight a strong enemy. He never fell into a dilemma and could not extricate himself. He did not change his original heart and had no regrets or complaints. To a certain extent, this heavenly tome of freedom could be said to be tailor-made for him. At the very least, it would not be so easy for him to go berserk. He retracted his divine thoughts from the jade scroll and did not seem to be reluctant to leave the feeling of freedom. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your guidance, Senior. This technique is indeed wonderful. I will cultivate it well and strive to reach the next level." He could not help but feel glad that he made this bet with Lu Tian. Otherwise, he did not know how many years he would have to work for the Myriad Phenomenon sect to obtain this heavenly tome of freedom. Time was really too important to him. The benefits of this bet were already showing. Spirit Venerable Guihai pondered and said, "The warning was indeed unnecessary. This child has a strong and resolute heart. No ordinary person can compare to him. He is an unparalleled talent. If he does not fall, he will definitely have a great opportunity. He will not just be a direct disciple of the Myriad Phenomenon sect. I do not know if this is a blessing or a curse for the Myriad Phenomenon sect. Let me observe him carefully." He waved his hand indifferently and said, "If there is nothing else, you can leave. Don't disturb my reading." He turned and left. Li Qingshan had achieved his goal of staying in the Myriad Phenomenon sect and obtained an extremely important heavenly tome. He should have been satisfied, but he felt a sense of loss, as if he had missed something important. He glanced at the bookshelves on both sides that were dozens of feet tall and reached the dome. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration. He recalled the thousands of books that flew toward him like butterflies. With his extremely strong memory, he searched through the books on the bookshelves and discovered something strange. Most of those books were not secret manuals of cultivation techniques, but all kinds of legends, historical stories, and stories of the same kind. He shouted at Spirit Venerable Guihai's back, "Wait!" Spirit Venerable Guihai turned around with his hands behind his back. He did not move, and his head almost turned half a circle. "What else is there?" Chapter 1389. How is it? Spirit Venerable Guihai looked at him curiously. This was because the Myriad Phenomenon sect's two sect masters had been following Elder Heaven Book Above the Nine Heavens for many years. Only he guarded the 9 heavens all year round. Firstly, it was to protect the sect and prevent foreign invasions. Secondly, it was to perfect the myriad heavenly book and accumulate knowledge for cultivation. He was a quiet and inactive person to begin with, so this job was very suitable for him. His main source of entertainment was reading. Among all the different types of books, only fresh and interesting stories could stand the test of time, allowing him to maintain his interest. As for the other types of books, be it poems, songs, or exquisite treatises, his wisdom and experience were enough to surpass most authors in the world. They were not worth reading at all. And this hobby of his was known by everyone in the sect. Therefore, disciples would often gather stories and contribute them in exchange for contribution bookmarks to satisfy his little hobby. In essence, the massive Myriad Phenomena sect was meant to serve Elder Heavenly Tome, Spirit Sovereign Guihai, the 2 sect masters, and a few others. Li Qingshan said excitedly, "I'm a novelist." That's odd. The corners of Spirit Venerable Guihai's mouth curled up slightly. He had probably smiled more today than he usually did in a year. It's true. Li Qingshan originally wanted to say that he had written books, but on second thought, they were basically copied and handed over to Little and to polish. It had nothing to do with him. Spirit Venerable Guihai would probably see through him the moment he said it, so he was too embarrassed to lie in front of him. Spirit Venerable Guihai looked at him indifferently with a mocking expression. Just now, when Li Qingshan was provoking him, the mockery was not as intense. "Ha! You are really a newborn calf that isn't afraid of tigers. Do what you need to do." Spirit Venerable Guihai waved his hand like he was shooing away a fly. He did believe Li Qingshan a little when he said that he could cultivate to become a perfected immortal. As for being a novelist, forget it. Even with my eyes closed, I can tell that you have some ink in your stomach. I said that I would contribute to the myriad phenomenon sect. Senior, you are right in front of me. Why give up what is near for what is far away? I wonder if I can get bookmark contributions by contributing a novel. Li Qingshan looked at Spirit Sovereign Guihai's eyes. It was like looking at a treasure trove filled with bookmarks. Of course, there was also a huge amount of contribution points. If it's interesting, it's worth reading. It's better than ordinary cultivation technique manuals. Spirit Sovereign Guihai clearly didn't believe that Li Qingshan had anything worth reading. All right, I understand. Senior, please lend me the jade slip again. What are you doing? Li Qingshan's eyes sparkled. I want to present the book. The jade slip streaked through the air and fell into Li Qingshan's hand. He immediately closed his eyes and concentrated. He began to input a novel into it. A moment later, he returned the jade slip to Venerable Sea Spirit. The Great Legend of the White Ape King. You wrote it? Spirit Venerable Guihai frowned and was slightly surprised. With his quick spiritual senses, he had read more than 100,000 words in the blink of an eye. Yes, what do you think, Senior? This was Li Qingshan's only original novel. He was quite serious about it. The words are crude and the characters are dull. It's even mixed with a bunch of low-level martial arts techniques. It's really long and stinky. In the blink of an eye, Spirit Sovereign Guihai had read hundreds of thousands of words, but it was a series of bad reviews. Li Qingshan knew he was not cut out for this. As for the study companions, attendants, and servants, although they valued this reward, they didn't even have the qualifications to enter heaven. Although they could offer some books through the book collection office, the range of their activities was very narrow, and the books they could search for were limited. As for the disciples who had advanced to the next level, they often didn't think much of this reward. If they had the free time, they might as well do something else and obtain more contribution bookmarks. As for the inherited teachings disciples, there was no need to mention them. Due to various reasons, as well as the fact that he read books too quickly, he often had to repeatedly read some old books. He knew very well that these books were not written by Li Qingshan. He could also roughly guess that Li Qingshan had brought them from a certain world. These novels came from the accumulation of a world, which was why they had such quantity and quality. Chapter 1390. It's here, it's here. This was the first time Li Qingshan realized that inscribing jade slips was such an arduous task. He had to constantly maintain his focus and could not slack off at all. Chasing after books was like carrying something that was not very heavy. In the beginning, he did not feel anything, but as time passed, his hands and feet would turn numb. He had to rely on the spirit turtle transformation to hold on. More importantly, the emblem on his chest flickered with light, and the bookmarks. There were not many of them. There were only some mystic wood, brass, and silver lots. There was not even a single green jade lot. However, Spirit Venerable Guihai was quick to read the information. In a moment, he had accumulated a huge amount. His contribution points were also rising rapidly. Later on, Spirit Sovereign Guihai found it troublesome and asked, "How much more do you have?" Li Qingshan answered, "As much as you want." Spirit Sovereign Guihai directly gave him a huge sum of contribution points and 10 green jade lots. He said, "If it's enough, I will reward you separately. If it's not enough, you will be deceiving a senior. Not only will I have to return everything, but I will also punish you heavily." "Don't worry, I have plenty," Li Qingshan agreed immediately. However, he felt a little worried after thinking about it. "I'll respect you as a senior, but don't scam me." That was because the value of every book was different. It was all up to Spirit Sovereign Guihai. If he only gave mystic with lots when he should have given brass, there was nothing Li Qingshan could do about it. Spirit Sovereign Guihai said unhappily, "Darn brat, you are arrogant and think too little of others. I'm a book lover. Even if it's for the sake of the author, I will not belittle the value of these books for some petty gains. I want as much as you have. Just give it to me." "All right." In the blink of an eye, the sky lit up. A night had passed. The surging ocean carried the myriad phenomenon sect as the roiling red clouds surrounded the sky. And in the east, there was a stone wall over 100 feet tall. In front of it was a large square. The stone wall was smooth and glossy. Only the words Myriad Phenomenon Ranking were engraved at the top. As the red sun rose above the East Sea, the sunlight gradually shone on the stone walls from top to bottom, reflecting the names one by one. The names were lined up one by one, and the name at the top was purple. It gradually became lighter, and after 20 or so names were listed, it turned into a sky blue color. It gradually became lighter again, and another few hundred names were listed. At the bottom was a golden color, and there were thousands of them. The pyramid was generally divided into 3 levels. They respectively represented the 10,000 elephant sect's true disciples, inner disciples, and ascension disciples. The 2 words, Lu Tian, were glowing purple and were surprisingly ranked 8th on the list. This represented his extremely high status in the Myriad sect. In the Wanxiang sect, seniority didn't depend on one's cultivation level or how early one entered the sect. It was all in this list. Li Qingshan had only been a disciple for less than a day. Even though he had contributed a lot of primary magnets in the entrance examination and was not far from becoming a chamber disciple, he was still at the very bottom of the list. The light, yellow name seemed to be melting in the sunlight. There were still a few thousand names between him and the green middle rank. This once again proved that the words of the casino owner couldn't be trusted. If becoming a chamber disciple was so easy, why would there be thousands of people struggling here, not to mention the few true disciples? However, his name only stayed at the bottom of the list for a very short period of time. To be precise, it was only for an instant. Then, it immediately jumped up a few hundred places. The scene was quite eye-catching. Several hundred names moved down one place at the same time. The plaza was bustling with people, and there were also many people standing under the stone wall to watch. This scene immediately attracted the attention of many people, and they all let out gasps of surprise. The entire plaza was immediately alarmed. Not knowing what had happened, they all looked at the stone wall and noticed a light yellow name. Li Qingshan, who is that? Never heard of him. I've never heard of such a person among the study companions generation. He's probably new. Isn't the entrance examination just recently? The examination just ended, and the guide boat has just arrived. Look at the group of people in front of the stone wall. They're still following the guide around. So how could they have gotten so many contribution points? one of the study companions must have gotten some kind of opportunity. There are tens of thousands of study companions in the sect. How can you remember all of them? Maybe. Look, he's still moving up. Sigh, the seniority is growing so fast. I was a senior brother just now, but now I'm his junior brother. What kind of opportunity did he get to get so many contribution points in a row? After a night of effort, Li Qingshan's name didn't rise as fast as before, but it was still climbing at a speed visible to the naked eye. He surpassed one senior brother after another, and gained one junior brother after another, causing everyone to be dumbfounded. Nie Xiuwen and Nie Xiuwu were standing side by side in front of the stone wall. The younger brother, Nie Xiuwu, had a pale face, and the scars left by Li Qingshan's violent beating had yet to disappear. The older brother, Nie Xiuwen, on the other hand, had a black face, so it was hard to tell. After fighting openly and secretly for a while, they actually didn't break up. Instead, after half a day and a night of sailing, they were on good terms with each other and were still good brothers. According to the usual practice, the disciple in charge of guiding them would bring them around Wanxiang City for sightseeing. This plaza was their first stop, mainly to view the Wanxiang ranking, so that they could understand their status in the sect and motivate them a little. Because the two brothers had high cultivation, they were at the front of the crowd. They looked up at the name and couldn't help but open their mouths. As the name continued to rise, their heads were raised higher and their mouths were opened wider and wider. Brother, is it that Li Qingshan? Who else could it be other than him? Sigh, it's not a shame to lose to him. You guys are from the same batch. Do you know where this junior brotherly came from? The guide disciple was the one Li Qingshan saw last night. He was also extremely shocked. Where did he go last night? How did he get so many contribution points in one night? If this goes on, it won't be long before I have to call him senior brother when I see him. The two brothers looked at each other. They had also heard about the big bet. After all, they were nascent soul cultivators, so Lu Tian and Li Qingshan didn't deliberately lower their voices. However, they decided to keep quiet. Not to mention, Lu Tian, just Li Qingshan alone, was not someone they should offend. Senior brother, we don't know either. It's fine if you don't want to tell me. Don't try to fool me with that. The guide disciple was a bit dissatisfied, but he didn't force them. Although one of them was an attendant and the other was a servant, it was only a matter of time for them to become disciples with their cultivation. Su Tong had a special ability in this aspect, and she heard it clearly yesterday. She suspected that it was Sister Ruan Yaozhu who helped them. Alas, it's really good to be under a big tree. I also need to find a big tree to lean on. In the crowd at the back, among the envious faces, a trace of resentment flashed in the eyes of a monk. He was bald, but he was wearing a Taoist robe. He was the muscular old Taoist who had been burnt black all over. Because of Li Qingshan's kindness, he barely survived and almost crawled out of the Yuan-Si mountain. He didn't have a piece of Yuan-Si iron in his hand, and he luckily passed the entrance assessment based on Lu Tian's promise to Wan Yaozhu. He had a strong body and abundant blood qi, so he seemed to recover faster than the two brothers. However, his hair and eyebrows couldn't grow out at once, and his internal injuries were very serious. Not only was his cultivation greatly damaged, but his lifespan was also affected. He hated Li Qingshan very much. Because he was afraid that the two brothers would secretly attack him, he hid in the crowd, and he was frequently looked at, which made him feel ashamed and resentful, seeing that his enemy was promoted step by step, but he had to start from a servant. He hated him even more. His internal organs felt like they were being cut by knives and burned by fire, which aggravated his internal injuries, and his face turned green and red. The two brothers seemed to feel something and looked back, only to see a bald head gradually retreating into the crowd, and a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. It's not that easy to withstand the wind and fire joint attack of our brothers. Now that the wind is breaking and the fire poison is attacking his heart, he still dares to provoke the devil in his heart. This old man can forget about going through the fourth heaven's punishment in his life. The muscular old Taoist quietly retreated from the crowd, pulled one of them, and asked, "May I ask where can I see senior brother Lu Tian? You're new here, right? Why do you ask? I have something to report to senior brother Lu Tian. At this time, he should be in the Chaotic Fate workshop. To be continued." Chapter 1391. Different from other sects, Wanxiang City was not a sealed-off cultivation ground. Instead, it was open to all cultivators. Cultivators could freely exchange, rest, and have fun here. There were hundreds of thousands of servants in the sect, and most of them were here to serve them. Thus, all sorts of facilities were created. Go clubs, restaurants, tea houses, and even brothels. As long as one wanted to and had the bookmark, everything could be bought here. It could be said to be all-inclusive. Among all these facilities, the most famous was the Chaotic Life Place, a casino personally managed by Lu Tian. Although there were many cheating methods in the cultivation world, one could always guard against them. However, divination and prophecy were impossible to guard against. Thus, a formation was specially set up to disrupt fate, which was why it was called Chaotic Life Place. The old Taoists soon arrived at the entrance of the Chaotic Life Place. The vermilion archway was tall, and people walked to and fro below. On the left was a golden toad, and on the right was a white jade piccio. There was also a stone tablet with a sentence carved on it: "Gambling changes one's fate, Lu Tian." This was probably one of the origins of the Chaotic Life Place. The archway was bustling with people. There were many buildings in the city that servants were not allowed to enter, but this Chaotic Life Place was the only exception. Regardless of status, anyone could come and try their luck. At this juncture, the old Taoist was a little timid and paced around the archway for a while. However, he was not only here to take revenge on Li Qingshan, but also to climb up the tree that was Lu Tian. If he could gain a foothold in the sect, he would be able to fight with Li Qingshan for a long time in the future. Otherwise, just one Yaozhu alone was enough to make him afraid. Thus, he steeled his heart and barged in. At the highest level of the Chaotic Life Place, bright sunlight filled the room. Lu Tian was lying on a golden rattan chair. The golden goblet in his hand was glistening, and the mellow wine was dyed golden. From here, he could see most of the buildings in the city. Lu Tian sipped the golden wine and looked at a certain place in the city. Deep in thought, a female cultivator knocked on the door and entered. She wore a golden dress that dragged on the ground. She wore a golden phoenix hairpin, golden earrings, golden bracelets, and other gold accessories. However, she did not look tacky at all. Instead, she looked extraordinarily noble and bright. She looked like the empress of a great country, compared to Lu Tian, who was lying on the reclining chair. He looked more like the second generation of a wealthy family. The female cultivator was very careful, and her footsteps were as light as a cat's. She whispered into his ear, "Senior Marshal Brother, there's a Taoist who doesn't look like a Taoist. This monk doesn't look like this monk's servant. He wants to see you, saying that he wants to thank you for your kindness. I saw that he has a nascent soul cultivation base, so I came to report to you." "I won't see you." "Yes." When the female cultivator saw that Lu Tian had no intention to continue speaking, she reluctantly left the room. A cultivator immediately came up and respectfully asked, "Senior Marshal Sister Jean, what did Senior Brother Lu say?" She had regained the majesty of an empress. Her phoenix-like eyes were filled with killing intent. "Make him scram." The order was passed on a few more times, and finally it was, "All of you, beat that bald donkey out of here." This senior marshal brother, although he is only a servant, he is still a nascent soul cultivator. We are only at the foundation establishment stage. How can we defeat him? So what if you're at the nascent soul realm? This is the chaotic fate place. All of you are attendants. So how could he, a mere servant, dare to retaliate? How unlucky! I was scolded by the foreman because of him. People say that if you see a bald person, you will lose, and it is indeed true. Thus, the old Taoist was beaten up again and thrown out of the door, surrounded by the crowd. Although he didn't suffer any injuries due to his strong physique, he felt depressed and spat out a few mouthfuls of blood, which worsened his internal injuries. "Lu Tian, why don't you make him stay?" The three-legged golden toad turned into a golden-haired, golden-eyed young man, lazily lying on the edge of the hot spring. He stacked the gold bars high up, stuck out his tongue, and rolled up a piece, chewing as he mumbled. "He is just a piece of trash. He is a nascent soul cultivator. Are you angry? That Li Qingshan is really powerful. He is about to beat you twice in a row." The three-legged golden toad glanced outside, following Lu Tian's gaze. It was the big square where the myriad phenomenon list was erected, and even Li Qingshan's name could be seen clearly. A piece of trash is not worth the bet, not even a piece of mystic wood lot. Does Lung Yuan think that he is the only one who saw the essence-stealing and qi-concealing embryo art? The most important thing in gambling is courage. This kind of rat who treats cowardice as prudence and despicability as wisdom will only lower my chances of winning. That Li Qingshan was summoned as soon as he entered the heaven, so he must have contributed some miscellaneous books, and the number must be very large. This is not surprising. After all, he most likely ascended from the mortal realm, and nascent soul cultivators of the human realm don't have this kind of courage. Lu Tian wasn't worried at all. His deduction was almost exactly the same as the reality. The three-legged golden toad swallowed all the gold. He doesn't look like someone who likes to read. The wine in the golden goblet shook slightly, and Lu Tian said, "So he will come out soon." However, Li Qingshan stayed in the heaven for 6 days and 7 nights before coming out. In these 6 days, his ranking on the myriad phenomenon ranking rose step by step, constantly rising. Towards the end, he slowed down a lot because he had already contributed most of the most valuable books in the 5 states world, and the speed at which he recorded in the jade slips became slower and slower. However, he still climbed up without a moment's pause, surpassing another 1,000 people. Just now, he stopped actually becoming a small legend in the myriad phenomenon sect. However, Li Qingshan felt utterly horrible right now. His head felt like it was about to split open. The drain on his soul sense from constantly recording the jade slips was only a small matter. Most importantly, he had several thousand novels churning through his head, yet he could still remember every single character and every single line of dialogue. They were all lifelike, like a dream. As he gazed at myriad phenomenon city before him, he found it unreal. Chapter 1392. In Wan Yaozhu's eyes, that smile was full of vitality facing the morning sun. She couldn't help but smile. Although the Heaven's Gate was not as noisy and lively as the chaotic life place, it was still a place where people came and went. Moreover, they were all disciples who had entered the inner chamber. This scene of looking at each other and smiling, when seen by bystanders, caused them to be filled with wild and fanciful thoughts. Originally, Wan Yaozhu was hiding in a hidden place waiting for Li Qingshan. At this moment, men and women all came up to greet her, calling out, "Senior Marshal Sister Wan." However, they were all thinking in their hearts, "Who is this man? Why is he so close to Senior Marshal Sister Wan?" Perhaps it was because Li Qingshan was here, but Wan Yaozhu felt slightly uncomfortable. Junior Marshal Brother Li, let's go to the 100 Herb Garden. Okay. Li Qingshan immediately noticed that the gazes of the people around him were getting more and more strange, as well as unconcealable envy. Li Qingshan followed the 9-colored deer out of Wanxiang City and arrived at a small island 1,000 miles away. The island was covered in luxuriant grass and dense green. Birds flew in the sky, and it was full of vitality. It was indeed a beautiful place. However, as Li Qingshan looked around, he didn't see any decent lingji or immortal herbs. This is the 100 Herb Garden? Not yet. As Wan Yaozhu spoke, the 9-colored deer descended from the sky and landed on the small island. Li Qingshan immediately felt that this small island wasn't normal. The density of the spiritual energy was abnormally dense, almost as dense as the Chua Dragon's Cave. The island was covered in layers of formations that were invisible. It was like an inescapable net, and the security was no less than that of Wanxiang City. If not for Wan Yaozhu leading the way, he definitely wouldn't be able to take a step on this island. Kid, you're really lucky. It's all because you helped us earn so many bookmarks. The 9-colored deer slowed down and followed the small path in the forest to a picturesque place. On the vast expanse of green grass, there was an arched door made of green vines. There were even flowers blooming on the door. Under the morning light, it was like a fairy tale world. The 9-colored deer jumped and disappeared into the arched door. Waves of colorful ripples spread out from the door like rainbows. Li Qingshan seemed to understand something and stepped into the arched door. In an instant, an incomparable world appeared in front of him. This was a heavenly grotto. The place wasn't big, only 1,000 miles in circumference. However, within this 1,000 miles there were mountain ranges, deep valleys, and springs. There were also barren ice plains, swamps, and lakes, but they didn't seem messy at all. They were natural, as if they were in a painting, as if they were condensed from a complete world. Li Qingshan had seen a lot of things. As a man who was the god of the world, this wasn't all that surprising. However, there were countless exotic flowers and plants in this area, competing with each other in beauty under the bright sunlight, or silently in the deep valley. Even though he did not know how to identify flowers and plants, he could easily tell that these flowers and trees were precious. The density of the spiritual energy here was beyond imagination. Even Huilong's cave couldn't compare to it. And how big was Huilong's cave? He immediately understood why this island was so heavily guarded, and why those people envied him. This place was probably more important to the nature sect than Tiandu. The heavenly book was just afraid of being stolen, but it wasn't really a loss. Everything in the building was probably recorded in the old turtle's mind. Even if Tiandu was burned down by someone, it wouldn't matter. However, if this place was stolen or destroyed, it probably wouldn't recover even after 100,000 years. If one wasn't a direct disciple, how many people were qualified to have a cave like Huilong's? Wan Yaozhu said she wanted to help him find a stable job. However, working here wouldn't just give him a stable job. Wan Yaozhu smiled. Welcome to the herb garden. I really don't know what to say. Li Qingshan sighed. He had just received the unfettered heavenly book. He needed a lot of spiritual energy, and the environment here was too suitable for Qilin transformation. Wan Yaozhu smiled. No need to be so polite. Work hard to repay me. Li Qingshan felt that she became much more lively after coming to the herb garden. He smiled. Okay, speak. What do you need me to do? There's no need to rush. I can see that you're very tired. You should rest first. Oh, right. You've already received the heavenly book from Spirit Venerable Guihai, right? Yes. Wan Yaozhu asked curiously. What heavenly book? You don't have to say it. if you don't want to. I'm cultivating the heavenly book of nature. Li Qingshan praised. Tao imitates nature. It sounds very powerful. It's not that powerful. According to Spirit Venerable, this heavenly book should be called the minor heavenly book of nature. It's still far from the true Tao of nature. It's just that it's good at taking care of these plants, so it was arranged to be in charge of the herb garden. Li Qingshan chuckled. That's such a coincidence. My heavenly book is only one word different from yours. Even the evaluation is about the same. Wan Yaozhu's curiosity was piqued. She could no longer be gentle and considerate. She urged, quickly tell me what heavenly book you're cultivating. I'll tell you everything. At this stage of cultivation, a cultivation technique was no longer just a cultivation technique. It was a true path. Every heavenly book was a path, and it could almost represent everything about a cultivator, such as thoughts, abilities, temperaments, and so on. Senior sister, I'm cultivating the heavenly book of freedom or the minor heavenly book of freedom. Wan Yaozhu was moved. Is it really fate? She blinked her eyes. I've never heard of such a heavenly book. Are you lying to me? Li Qingshan patted his chest and promised, I won't lie to you. I hope you can keep your promise. Wan Yaozhu looked at him with a faint smile, which made Li Qingshan feel a little guilty. He said inwardly, I hope so. Wan Yaozhu explained seriously, the heavenly book of freedom must have something to do with the great world of freedom. I don't know how effective it is. It must be very different from my nature heavenly book. It's just a coincidence that one word is the same. Many heavenly books have similar evaluations from Spirit Venerable. Li Qingshan said, how can it not be effective? This heavenly tomes cost me a total of 805 green jade slips. If it weren't for senior brother Lu Tian's financial assistance, who knows when I would have been able to obtain it. I really have to thank senior brother Lu Tian, but I really don't know how you can win this bet. Wan Yaozhu sighed slightly, then said seriously, if you need sapphire tags, I can lend them to you, but work and contribution have rules. I can give you more sapphire tags as a reward, but contribution is related to the whole nature sex rules. Big is big, small is small. If you have it, you have it. No matter who it is, I won't show favoritism. Don't look down on me. I, Li Qingshan, am not a man who lives off women. Don't worry about me. I have a plan, and I'll make Lu Tian lose everything. What do you mean by living off women? Who's worried about you? Wan Yaozhu patrolled around the 100 herb garden and dealt with some trivial matters. She felt slightly uneasy. Sigh, he's actually sleeping. Really? The 9-colored deer looked back at the golden leaf Bodhi tree and said, Blockhead, oh blockhead, you're inviting a wolf into the house. Wan Yaozhu smiled and said, didn't you say that he's been a good person since he was young and can't even bear to step on ants? That's exactly why it's so bad. Regardless of whether he's a good person or not, he's still a man. This kid is obviously a playboy, and a playboy. You have to be wary of him in the future to avoid a disaster of love. Wan Yaozhu blushed and said, what are you talking about? I just don't want him to lose to senior brother Lu Tian. That's 2,000 green jade lots. How can he afford to lose? The 9-colored deer said, this is too scary. You've known Lu Tian for more than 1,000 years, but you've only known this kid for less than 10 days. Could it be that you've been bewitched? Could it be that this kid has the bloodline of the 9-tailed fox? Wan Yaozhu was slightly stunned. Everything was so logical that she didn't think too deeply about the reason behind it. Perhaps she was moved by the Qilin's benevolence, or perhaps she didn't want to see a good person fall into a hopeless situation, or perhaps she wanted to take a gamble with Lu Tian, who had never listened to her for the past 1,000 years. It was difficult to distinguish all the reasons, but there was no need to care so much. Jill, thank you for your reminder, but I'm wholeheartedly cultivating, so how can I fall into the trap of love? If junior brother Lee really has other intentions, please help me chase him out of the 100 Herb Garden. If he doesn't have other intentions, do you think I'm that unreserved? Okay, I'll help you keep an eye on him. Hee, with my blockhead's character and appearance, I don't believe that he won't be tempted. You deserve a beating. Li Qingshan was in a deep sleep and still didn't know that he had been targeted. Even if he knew, he wouldn't care. He had just stepped into the 6 paths of reincarnation and was preparing to face demon god Chongqi. He was in high spirits, and his fighting spirit was high, so how could he have the mood to be in the mood for romance? Furthermore, she was so nice to him. So how could he have thoughts of sleeping with her and ruin her cultivation? This was not in line with his principle of revenge must be repaid. Although he was asleep, there was still a trace of consciousness left in his mind, and he cast it into the 5 continents world from the perspective of the world god. The vast ocean, the various continents, humans, ghosts, and demons were like a magnificent painting unfolding in front of his eyes. Although it wasn't as exquisite as the 100 Herb Garden, it was truly a world that belonged to him. The key to winning this bet was here. Li Qingshan knew himself well. Although he was known as a novelist, he didn't have any talent in writing novels. He could only copy a few books, but it wasn't a long-term plan. However, books were written by people, and even if he didn't have the talent, it didn't mean that others didn't. There were hundreds of millions of people in the 5 continents world, and there was a huge time difference with the mortal realm. He could organize tens of thousands of people to write, and it would be impossible for him to gain nothing. As long as there was a 1% or even a 1,000th chance of success, it would mean an endless supply of contribution points and bookmarks. Even if Lu Tian used up all his schemes, he wouldn't have thought that he would have a world of his own, and that his thoughts could enter and leave it freely. The world itself couldn't directly provide any cultivation resources, but as long as it was used properly, its value was beyond imagination. Perhaps this was what Zhuolong wanted to do, but didn't manage to do. Guihai Lingzuan used the rules of the entire myriad appearance sect to satisfy his little hobby, while Li Qingshan could use his identity as the world god to make the entire world assist him in his cultivation. This was the power and prestige of a cultivator. As for winning this small bet, it was just something he did in passing, and he didn't really care about it. 30 years was still a long time, and if it didn't work out, he could still renege on the debt. The most important thing now was to obtain a decent abode of immortals. Ruan Yaozhu could be considered a kind master, but although the 100 Herb Garden was good, and no matter how wonderful the Bodhi tree was, he was still living under someone else's roof, and it wasn't a place for a real man to love for a long time. To be continued. Could it be said that the great freedom demon Lord understood the human heart better than the Buddha? Various demonic thoughts were born from the heart. A single misstep could become a demonic obstacle. If mortals wanted to succeed, they needed to be careful to bow, to reflect, and to control themselves. Once they made a mistake, their entire life would be wasted, and they might even lose their lives. Moreover, it was a huge matter like cultivation. Terrifying power was contained within the body, and the mind was constantly changing. Who dared to be free and do as they pleased? If they let all kinds of thoughts run wild, a moment of carelessness would lead to chi deviation, and their souls would scatter. They wouldn't even be able to enter the cycle of reincarnation. Therefore, this path was what everyone yearned for, and everyone yearned for it. Instead, it was even more difficult than the strict Buddhist path of cultivation. Very few people could walk this path. Li Qingshan rubbed his belly. It's like I'm pregnant. Ha! He couldn't help but laugh proudly at this exquisite metaphor. You've already comprehended the heavenly tome of freedom. Ruan Yaozhu sensed the commotion and came over to take a look. The heavenly tome of all nature was extremely profound. Back then, she had spent several years comprehending the heavenly tome of nature, which was already considered very fast. He only slept under the tree for a while, and when he woke up, it only took him 10 minutes to transform his cultivation into a heavenly tome. Could it be that he was really a rare genius in cultivation? This was not only because Li Qingshan had the foundation of the Extreme Emperor's record of world destruction and the Extreme Emperor's record of the world, as well as the powerful assistance of the 9 transformations of the demonic and celestial. It wasn't just because their hearts and natures were compatible. Although the heavenly tome of freedom was difficult and dangerous, it also had one advantage, and that was its speed. It was so fast that even the cultivator himself felt afraid, so fast that he could lose control at any time and become qi deviation. Chapter 1395. Wan Yaozhu said, "Junior Marshal Brother, do you know the cloning technique?" I guess I know a thing or two. Take this fractal shadow form technique and comprehend it. With your comprehension, you should be able to grasp it quickly. 9-Colored Deer said, "This phantasm technique needs to be exchanged with a green jade lot in the sky." Li Qingshan smiled and accepted it calmly. He closed his eyes and began to comprehend. Wan Yaozhu looked at him with great interest. She did not expect that he would immediately start to comprehend it. Although this fractal shadowization technique was only a Tao technique, it was not easy for a layman to master it freely. After a while, Li Qingshan opened his eyes. His nascent soul flashed, and a faint silhouette emerged from his body. It was like an invisible shadow, full of qi. Wan Yaozhu was surprised. "You really didn't know the cloning technique before?" "I know a thing or two, just a thing or two," Li Qingshan answered vaguely. Although moon reflection wasn't a spell but an innate ability, it was far beyond the reach of this phantasm technique. "This clone is really weak. I'm afraid it won't be able to do any hard work. It's better not to have it." He sensed that this shadow clone couldn't be too far away from him, and was very weak. It didn't even have 1% of his strength. This was to be expected. Although the myriad sex spells were mysterious, this was after all the human world. All spells were restricted by the laws of heaven and earth. You don't know, but most of the work in the herb garden doesn't require a lot of power, but it requires exquisite cooperation. Wan Yaozhu smiled and took out a jade scroll. "This is some of my experiences. You'll understand after reading it." 9-Colored Deer sighed. "Hey, Softwood, you're really generous." "Kid, if it wasn't for the fact that you helped us win, I wouldn't have let you see this jade scroll for nothing." "I understand now. Every spirit herb has a different spirituality and radiates different qi. They affect each other and even restrain each other. It contains the principle of the 5 elements reinforcing and restraining each other. The Tao of yin and yang's changes requires a deep understanding of the laws involved and the overall situation at all times to be able to do this job well." Li Qingshan skimmed through it and understood. Although the spirit qi in this 100 herb garden was dense, the spirit herbs planted were too densely packed after all. The green dragon bamboo hated metal the most, but the sharp-tooth grass needed to be fertilized with iron slag. The golden leaf Bodhi tree beside him had roots that covered the entire hill. There was no room for any other plants to grow. As for some plants, they couldn't get close to humans, so they had to use their clones. Furthermore, many plants and vegetation are extremely dangerous, even to cultivators. If they aren't careful and are poisoned, their lives will be in danger. I don't know how many doppelgangers you can create. This will determine the efficiency of your job, as well as your pay. Wan Yaozhu saw that he had comprehended the fractal shadow technique so quickly. He wanted to test his methods. "Let me try." Li Qingshan's interest was also piqued. He closed his eyes again, activating his nascent soul. His mind divided into two, two into four, four into eight, and so on and so forth. He used the fractal shadow technique. Wan Yaozhu saw shadows walk out from Li Qingshan's body. In a short while, there were more than 100 shadows under the tree. She was also surprised. Ordinary nascent soul cultivators could create 12 to 20 doppelgangers. That was already a lot. She thought the great freedom heavenly demon has always been known for its transformations. Could it be that the Heavenly Book of Freedom has a special effect on this technique? Senior Marshal Sister, are there enough doppelgangers? Li Qingshan didn't think that there was anything great about it. These shadow doppelgangers were all weak. Even if they were added together, they wouldn't be as strong as a mirror doppelganger. They could only be used for farm work. Of course, there are more doppelgangers. The more doppelgangers you have, the more spirit herbs you can take care of. But can you control so many doppelgangers? There doesn't seem to be a problem. With a thought from Li Qingshan, all of the shadow doppelgangers moved. First, they lined up neatly like an army. Then, they stacked on top of each other until they reached the depths of the tree. In the end, they scattered again. It was a mess. Wan Yaozhu originally thought that he couldn't control them, but she saw these doppelgangers. Some were hunched like old men, some were arrogant like generals. They imitated the appearance of all living beings and had a lot of fun. She couldn't help but sigh at the vastness of the world. There really were many unparalleled geniuses. However, Li Qingshan said, I've only just grasped the basics of the Heavenly Book of Freedom. My comprehension of this technique isn't too deep either. Otherwise, I would be able to create even more doppelgangers. Furthermore, the spirit turtle transformation was also suppressed to the 4th layer. Otherwise, the number and agility of the doppelgangers would be even greater. I'll take you to get the tools. Wan Yaozhu shook her head. She no longer doubted whether he had the ability to do this job well. Even she did not have this ability when she was at the same cultivation realm back then. He was basically sent by the heavens to help him take care of the 100 herb garden. They arrived in a valley. There were many large storehouses here. Along the way, Wan Yaozhu rode the deer in front, while Li Qingshan walked behind her. There were over 100 shadow doppelgangers following behind them. It was like they were on a parade, attracting the attention of everyone. Wan Yaozhu thought about it and opened a storehouse. There were not farming tools like hoes and scissors inside, but puppets arranged neatly. Some were large, some were small, some were metal, some were wood. They all varied in appearance. There were some special spiritual herbs that even the doppelgangers were unable to approach. They needed special puppets. Can you split your consciousness and control some puppets? What's so difficult about that? Li Qingshan smiled. In that instant, his soul sense spread out, and half of the puppets in the storehouse actually began to move. However, their movements were rather stiff, not as smooth as when he controlled the shadow doppelgangers. This caused Wan Yaozhu to be incomparably shocked. She hurriedly said, all right, there's no need for so much. I already know your level. I can arrange a job for you. Li Qingshan also heaved a sigh of relief. This was also the limit for him. However, he still felt somewhat dissatisfied. There was always a feeling of emptiness, as if he had only used 40 to 50% of his strength, or even 2 to 3% of it, regardless of whether it was the Book of Freedom or the Qilin longevity strategy. They were only at the entry level. In fact, they couldn't even be considered entry level. This dragged down the other fiend god transformations by a level. The key was that he had not undergone the 4th heavenly tribulation. He was clearly only one step away, yet he was stuck here. However, he was not in a hurry. He had already vaguely seen a glimmer of hope. This 100-herb garden was very suitable for cultivating the Qilin transformation, and the Book of Freedom was also deeply in line with his temperament. No matter which one he broke through, he would undergo the fourth heavenly tribulation. And once he crossed this step, the sea and the sky would be wide open, and his cultivation would increase by leaps and bounds. This was already the final dormancy. That glimmer of hope was precisely from the open door of the path of the 9 heavens. In the vast sea and sky, there would definitely be storms and thunder. When he thought that in the future, he might not have the opportunity to stay in such a beautiful garden and enjoy such peaceful and quiet time, even he felt a little emotional. Senior sister, I will remember your kindness. Li Qingshan's eyes were burning. Wan Yaozhu was stunned for a moment. That gaze was full of cherishing, but it had nothing to do with love. It gave her a strange feeling. Although he was right in front of her, she had a feeling that she could not touch him, as if he could fly away at any time. As long as you work hard, it will be considered as repaying me. P.S. I've been working hard these few days. Every day, I walked down from the 16th floor and climbed back up. In between, I skipped 2,000 times. My arms seem to have improved a little. Nothing can stop us, right? This month, I won't write a speech asking for votes. Everyone, vote as you see fit. Finally, I'll send the first sentence of a novel that I like very much. Kilimanjaro is a mountain with an altitude of 19,710 feet. It is covered with snow all year round. It is said to be the highest mountain in Africa. The West High Peak is called the Masai's, Ochioi, or God's Temple. Near the West High Peak, there is the already dried and frozen corpse of a leopard. No one has ever explained what the leopard was looking for in such a cold place. Chapter 1396. Of course. The two looked at each other and smiled. In this 100-herb garden, there was a tacit understanding between them. Cultivators met strangers and helped each other, but there was no need to love each other because it was better to forget each other in Jianghu. Senior Sister Wan, this is... A voice broke the peaceful atmosphere. The two of them looked back and saw a man floating over. His long black hair was tied with a headband, and he wore a sky-blue robe that fluttered in the wind. In his right hand was a scroll of poetry, and he looked like a refined and handsome scholar. Wan Yaozhu's smile immediately disappeared, and she returned to her dull expression. Junior Brother Shen, this is Li Qingshan, Junior Brother Li. He just joined Wanxiang's sect, and will be working in 100-herb garden. Oh, then I'd like to ask for guidance. Shun Yushu's clear eyes swept over the badge on Li Qingshan's chest, and then the many shadows. Just entered the sect, and already an official disciple. He must be the first in the entrance exam. Junior Brother Li's cultivation is indeed extraordinary. No wonder you can gain Senior Sister Ruan's favor. Li Qingshan immediately felt a subtle hostility, purely from the instinct of a male animal. He thought, it seems that no matter how high one's cultivation is, it is difficult for humans to transcend animal instincts. Eating, drinking, men and women, human desires. Even immortals need to take bait, eat pills, eat spirits, and drink qi. It seems that the way of eating is impossible. The feelings between men and women are also the same. This guy is obviously Wan Yaozhu's pursuer, but Wan Yaozhu obviously did not need a pursuer, and he had no intention of becoming one of her pursuers. Otherwise, he would be a bit embarrassed if she treated him so well. He cupped his hands and said, I still have not asked for Senior Brother Shun's name. Shun Yushu. Shun Yushu bowed slightly in a refined and courteous manner, but that was the courtesy of a superior to a subordinate, the modesty of a noble young master to a village man. The badge on his chest, symbolizing the status of an inner disciple, shone brightly under the sunlight. Li Qingshan narrowed his eyes. Even though he had no intentions towards Wan Yaozhu, his competitive spirit was aroused. He thought again. Forget it, if he is always so competitive, when will he be able to cultivate the Qilin transformation? In any case, Wan Yaozhu is not interested in him. So why should I be jealous? In other words, if Wan Yaozhu was really interested in this Chen Yushu, he might not be able to hold himself back from making a move. He laughed and said, "Good name, Senior Marshal Brother Shen. It's my first time here. Please take care of me in the future." Well said, well said. I'm the one in charge of all the chores in the 100 Herb Garden. In the blink of an eye, 100 years have passed. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask me. I'll definitely tell you everything I know. Chen Yushu said very generously, and turned to Wan Yaozhu to complain. "Senior sister, why did you come to such a messy place? Leave these trivial matters to me. I'll let junior apprentice brother Li take care of the area 15 kilometers around the gold leaf Bodhi tree. I'm going to cultivate." Wan Yaozhu only spoke a few words before the 9-colored deer's hind hooves kicked off and flew away, leaving behind Li Qingshan and Shen Yushu to look at each other in dismay. Once Wan Yaozhu left, Chen Yushu's expression immediately became a bit more reserved. "Junior brother Li, have you done similar work before? This job is not as easy as you think. Do you know what I'm thinking?" Li Qingshan took out the posture of a phoenix and was even more reserved than him. No, in a split second, the two men were like two male peacocks spreading their tails. Chen Yushu frowned imperceptibly. A pair of gentle deer eyes were embedded on her beautiful face. She stared at Wan Yaozhu and said, "This isn't harsh. He is very dangerous. Believe me, stay away from him. A guy who cultivates the unrestrained, heavenly devil path is definitely not a good person." Wan Yaozhu seemed to not hear it and propped up her chin. If junior apprentice brother Li can cross the fourth heavenly tribulation with the Qilin bloodline, he might be able to replace junior apprentice brother Chen's position. He is really too annoying right now. Look, what did I say? The 9-colored young girl supported her forehead with her hand and had a helpless expression as if she was looking at her own daughter, who was about to be seduced by this bad boy. She put her hands on her waist and righteously said, "If that boy dares to have any disloyal thoughts towards you, immediately drive him out of the 100 Herb Garden. There is no room for discussion. All right, can you put on some clothes?" "I don't want to." Li Qingshan didn't hurry to get to work. Instead, he strolled in the field. Sometimes he sniffed a flower, and sometimes he touched a tree. He was like a tiger patrolling its territory, wanting to leave its scent everywhere. Now that he personally experienced it, he felt the extraordinariness of this 100 Herb Garden even more. Every exotic flower and rare grass had their own living environment, but they were all gathered in this small 100 Herb Garden, thriving together. When he thought about it carefully, it was simply an inconceivable matter. This 100 Herb Garden was simply like a complete life form, and also like the crystallization of the entire nature, extremely perfect and exquisite. In the end, who designed all of this? Spirit Venerable Gui Hai, who was good at deduction, the two mysterious sect masters, or the Tianshu elder, who was above the 9 heavens. Chen Yushu looked at him from afar and thought that he was at a loss. "Arrogant person, let's see what you can do. Obediently come and beg me." Unknowingly, Li Qingshan arrived in front of a clump of sharp-toothed grass. These bone-white slender blades of grass were indeed as sharp as teeth. They were dense and slender like a forest, and they even emitted a strange fragrance. It wasn't the fragrance of flowers, but it instead made him think of the taste of the human heart. It was rich and tempting, and he couldn't help but walk closer. Chun Yushu sneered in his heart. Idiot! The sharp-toothed grass feeds on flesh and blood. Once it gets close, it will suddenly grow and launch an attack. This clump of sharp-toothed grass has been planted for tens of thousands of years. Rashly approaching it, even a gold core cultivator's life would be in danger. If you don't know what's good for you, you will suffer. The sharp-toothed grass suddenly grew crazily, reaching a length of more than 10 zhang, and they all rushed towards Li Qingshan. However, the sharp-toothed grass gently twined around Li Qingshan's body, without the slightest bit of fierceness. Li Qingshan waved his hand, and it slowly shrank back to its original state. Chun Yushu was stunned. What's going on? Chapter 1397. In an instant, the entire world had changed. Originally, in his eyes, those flowers and plants were all the same. It was just that they were a little bigger, and I was a little smaller, you were a little redder, and I was a little greener. Now, even if it was the same species of flowers and trees, because of the length of years, the difference in time, and the color of the petals, there were clear differences. Even if they all had one nose and two eyes, there were still thousands of people with thousands of faces, and there was absolutely no mistake. One could even see their respective temperaments, and everything they had experienced from these faces. This was no longer a lonely wilderness, but a bustling human world. The sharp-fanged grass in front of him was like a group of bloodthirsty soldiers, longing for the nourishment of flesh and blood, but now they longed for metal powder to maintain their weapons. The black fir tree, not far away, was like an old man who had run from the cold to the tropics, troubled by the heat here. And those bright and beautiful three-leafed flame flowers were the exact opposite, complaining that this place was too cold. There was no need to carefully observe or judge according to the Atlas books. When Li Qingshan walked past them, he would hear all kinds of complaints and requests. Li Qingshan curled his lips. So troublesome. With his hands behind his back, he turned around and walked back to the hill, sitting down under the golden-leafed Bodhi tree. Chun Yushu laughed in his heart. How is it you don't know where to start? At the same time, Wan Yaozhu was also observing him, and couldn't help but worry if he was competent for this job. The nine-colored deer said, Don't worry, this kid has the Qilin bloodline, the jade slip you gave him, and so many clones, how can he not do it? Chun Yushu is going to be disappointed. Wan Yaozhu smiled. Qilin. I have never seen it with my own eyes, but I heard that all living beings will feel close to them, especially beasts, especially deer. So what? We have spirituality precisely to surpass our instincts. Wan Yaozhu touched her lips and smiled. So you deliberately criticized him a little more to balance this instinct. None of your business. After Li Qingshan investigated the situation of the people, he did not immediately start work. Instead, he continued to comprehend the unfettered heavenly book, inhaling and exhaling the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. The nascent soul in his body gradually solidified, becoming more and more like him. With a thought, his nascent soul flew into the small world in his body. In an instant, it was as if heaven and earth had just been born. In this world formed by earth, fire, wind, and water, there was originally only heartless plants. But now there was an additional little person who opened his clear eyes and looked up at the sky. His eyes met with Li Qingshan's. At the same time, he saw himself. From this moment on, this world finally had meaning. This change surprised Li Qingshan, and he immediately activated the 9 transformations of demons and gods. With the world as the cradle and heaven and earth as the furnace, he would nurture and train this little person. There was sunshine, rain and dew. There was also wind, frost, rain and snow. This little person's heart was mixed with bitterness and joy. He had to be vigilant in times of peace. One had to find joy in bitterness. He grew up alone in this small world. From crawling all over the ground, he gradually grew up, and then he began to learn how to walk. Every day, every moment, there were new changes. Li Qingshan was activating the 9 transformations of demons and gods and the Book of Freedom at the same time. They were originally 2 completely different cultivation systems, but at this moment, there was a surprising compatibility. He used the small world to nourish the nascent soul, and at the same time, he used the nascent soul to feed back to the small world. This was especially true for nascent souls. The benefits they received were simply too great. The small world was already far beyond Li Qingshan's current level, and it had extraordinary power. At this moment, he was using all the accumulation of the 9 transformations of demons and gods to support the cultivation of the Book of Freedom. Coupled with the rich spirit qi in the 100 Herb Garden, the nascent soul grew at a rapid pace. No matter how strong a nascent soul was, it would always look like a baby as clear as a newborn, curled up in a mother's belly. Only after going through 4 heavenly tribulations would the nascent soul and soul formation stage change. However, Li Qingshan's nascent soul was really growing, turning into the appearance of a 3 or 4-year-old child. Perhaps it was influenced by the various transformations of demons and gods, or perhaps the Book of Freedom was unusual in the first place. The expression on the child's face changed, as if shrouded in a layer of mist. He stood on the ground with his hands down, as if he had been standing there since ancient times, bearing the sorrow, joy, and anger of all humans. There were no spells in the unfettered heavenly tome, only pure Tao. This Tao was different from the ordinary Tao of cultivation. It was neither a pure heart and few desires, nor was it a supreme forgetfulness of emotions. Instead, it required extreme emotions and desires, to love more deeply, to hate more wildly, to be more furious, and to be more sorrowful than mortals. Love causes life, hate causes death. Anger destroys heaven and earth. Sorrow causes the whole world to cry. Because the Dharma understood impermanence, it sought emptiness in all 4 directions. Because it saw the world as a house of fire, as a sea of bitterness, it wanted to transcend, reach the other shore, and save the common people. If someone didn't seek the other shore, but willingly danced in the sea of bitterness, it would be the Tao of the devil. If someone understood impermanence, but didn't seek detachment, compassion, or save the common people, but instead turned into impermanence, mocking the common people, only seeking freedom, it would be the sky demon. The Tao of the sky demon was the Tao of impermanence. After Li Qingshan understood this, his nascent soul grew again, becoming closer to the appearance of a 7 or 8-year-old, becoming more and more stable. Unknowingly, he was completely immersed in cultivation, forgetting the passage of time. In the blink of an eye, 49 days had passed. The responsible field that Wan Yaozhu gave him was left unattended. Although the 100 Herb Garden was full of spiritual energy and had its own great circulation, and the exotic flowers and plants had strong vitality, so they wouldn't die, it was inevitable that they would become wilted and sparse. One had to know that even if the growth of spiritual plants slowed down a little, it would be a huge loss, let alone in this kind of situation. Shun Yushu came to report to Wan Yaozhu several times, wanting to drive Li Qingshan out of the 100 Herb Garden. Wan Yaozhu, on the other hand, used the excuse of cultivating in seclusion and refused to see him. The cultivators working in the 100 Herb Garden discussed spiritedly the tranquil and peaceful atmosphere was affected, and under Shin Yushu's instigation, some people became even more indignant. They could only cultivate for a while after working hard every day and enjoy some of the benefits of the 100 Herb Garden. If they wanted to concentrate on cultivating for a while, they would have to ask someone to help look after it, and they would have to return it later, who would sit under the golden leaf Bodhi tree for dozens of days, not doing any work at all. They were prepared to jointly write a petition to drive away this pest, Li Qingshan, after Wan Yaozhu came out of seclusion. Li Qingshan didn't know that he had already become the target of public criticism, and even if he knew, he wouldn't care. To him, this was just sharpening the knife will not delay the work of cutting firewood. As his nascent soul stabilized, he clearly understood the path of the unfettered heavenly book. Since there were 3,000 great Taoists, there were endless spells. The spells derived from the Tao of unfettered included the art of charm, the art of bewitching, the art of flight, the art of transformation, and so on. Learning to use this type of spell would have a very strong effect. And this art of shadow splitting happened to be one of the spells he was most proficient in. In addition to the increase in his cultivation, with a thought, layers upon layers of illusions appeared around him, and they were no longer vague human figures. Not only were they condensed, but their appearances were also clear, very similar to his original body. Their movements were sharp and light, far from what mortals could reach. Chapter 1398. In the middle of the herb garden, there was a small village surrounded by mountains. The pavilions and terraces were extremely elegant, and the small bridges and flowing water added to the scenery. Rather than calling it a village, it was more like a large manor. This was the place where the cultivators of the 100 Herb Garden rested and communicated. Usually, they worked in the fields that they were responsible for. When they were free, they would come here for a small gathering. Under the pavilion, Shun Yushu stood facing the water. Sounds of discussion came from behind him. I wonder what is the background of that Li Qingshan. Why is senior sister, Wan, so biased towards him? What nonsense are you talking about? Senior sister has always been impartial. How could she be biased? Could senior sister be a descendant of the Bailu country? No matter who he is, this is too much. At the very least, you should entrust a good job before you cultivate. I passed by that place a few days ago and saw that the 3-leafed bright flame flowers were almost wilting. This won't do. We must write a joint petition to kick this brat out. This is for the sake of the 100 Herb Garden. Without exception, these people were all disciples who had just arrived. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the right to talk about another disciple who had just arrived. At this moment, the crowd was enraged, and they all requested Shin Yushu to take the lead and drive Li Qingshan out of the 100 Herb Garden. The corners of Chun Yushu's lips slightly rose as he turned around. Junior brothers and junior sisters, please calm down. That Li Qingshan's actions are obvious to everyone. Perhaps he didn't do it on purpose. I believe senior sister, Wan, will give everyone an explanation. Not everyone is suitable to work in the 100 Herb Garden. Senior brother Shin is too magnanimous. He must have done it on purpose. Senior martial brother Shin is a gentleman, but you're gauging the heart of a lowly person with your own eyes. Senior sister Wan is in seclusion right now, and we don't know when she will come out. We can't let this kid ruin the 100 Herb Garden. Since senior sister Wan is not here, senior brother is in charge of the 100 Herb Garden. Why don't we join hands to take him down now and throw him out of the 100 Herb Garden? Shun Yushu repeatedly waved his hands. I am indebted to all the junior brothers and junior sisters for their kindness. I only stayed in the 100 Herb Garden for a few more days. How could he have crossed the line and done such a thing? Senior martial brother, please don't decline. This was all for the sake of the Herb Garden. When senior sister Wan comes out of seclusion, we'll ask for her forgiveness together. Shun Yushu declined again. This 100 Herb Garden does not allow fights of magic. If he fights back and injures many flowers and trees, what should we do then? Senior brother, you're putting that kid in your eyes too much. If that kid dares to make a move, then it's his fault. Besides, With senior brother's cultivation, dealing with a lucky disciple who has just entered the sect should be a piece of cake. Why would you need to fight? Shin Yushu muttered to himself irresolutely for a long time before letting out a long sigh. All right then. He bowed towards the east 3 times. This one has a duty to fulfill. I ask for senior sister's forgiveness. If there was anything wrong, go ahead and ask for instructions. After waiting for a while, there was no sound. Chun Yushu smiled in his heart. That boy's actions most likely infuriated her. She has always regarded the flowers and plants in this 100-herb garden as extremely important. It's just that she didn't want to lose face, so she couldn't do anything about it. Me chasing that brat out might be what she wanted. With a wave of his sleeves, he said, "Let's go." Junior brothers and sisters, please be my witnesses. The group of people rode the clouds and rode the mist flying through the air towards the gold leaf Bodhi tree. In the evening rain, the gold leaf Bodhi tree still shone brilliantly. In the distance, many figures could be seen moving in the forest below the hill. They seemed to be working. So many people. Aren't they doppelgangers? Would I not be able to distinguish between doppelgangers and people? Besides, how could there be so many doppelgangers? Chin Yushu frowned. Could it be that someone had come to help him? But he felt that it wasn't very likely. In this 100-herb garden, even the attending disciples didn't dare to disobey his orders, not to mention those study companions and attendants. When he got closer, his eyes suddenly widened. Those figures were actually doppelgangers, but their bodies were too similar to real people. Even their faces could be clearly distinguished. The figures were working in the forest, some fertilizing and some watering, working together with tacit understanding. Apart from the doppelgangers, there were actually more than 10 puppets. A red puppet spewed fire from its mouth, watering a cluster of 3-leafed bright flame flowers. The petals unfolded in the flames, without a hint of wilting. The rest of the puppets also had their own functions. They were operated as if they were alive. The cultivators behind were also shocked. They really are doppelgangers. How can he have so many doppelgangers? There are so many puppets. That consumes a lot of spiritual sense, but he can actually control them to such an extent. How did he do it? What cultivation level is he at? Is he really a nascent soul cultivator? If he went through 4 heavenly tribulations, wouldn't he have even more doppelgangers? And look at his work, it's so meticulous. He's practically a veteran among veterans. No matter how you look at it, it doesn't seem like he hasn't done it before. For a moment, all the anger and dissatisfaction turned into indescribable surprise. Chun Yushu frowned, suddenly feeling a great threat. This was no longer just a matter of vying for justice, but also related to his status in the 100-herb garden. In these years, there were also many inner disciples who worked in the 100-herb garden, but he found ways to push them out. He had the advantage of the heavenly book of nature. Other people, even if they had the same cultivation level, couldn't compete with him. In the end, he discovered that he couldn't get as many benefits here, so he might as well do other work. The contribution bookmarks that the 100-herb garden could provide were all given out together by the Myriad Appearance sect, and then distributed by Wan Yaozhu, the master of the 100-herb garden, according to work. Chen Yushu had obtained a lot of benefits from it over the years. That was why he could increase his cultivation level so quickly, approaching 5 heavenly tribulations. If it was said that he only had some thoughts about Wan Yaozhu, then he would succeed if he couldn't. But this kind of resource was the root of his life that he absolutely couldn't give up. It was directly related to his cultivation path. So he absolutely couldn't let anyone threaten him. Rumble, 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 muffled thunder flashed in the clouds, crushing this part of the sky that wasn't that big. Chen Yushu shouted sternly, Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan was leisurely lying on the bamboo mat with his arms as a pillow. Hearing this, he didn't get up and lazily said, What's the matter? Chen Yushu floated down and walked forward. Changing his usual modest and gentlemanly appearance, he said in a harsh tone, Do you know your crime? What crime have I committed? You've neglected your duties and slacked off these past few days. Isn't that a crime? The bottom of the hill was full of busy doppelgangers, so these words couldn't help but be a bit strange. Everyone knew that this time Chen Yushu was really going to turn hostile, so they all kept their mouths shut. If Li Qingshan had continued to slack off, or if he had made a terrible mess and was willing to lower his head and admit defeat, Chen Yushu might have spared him. However, given the current situation, he had made up his mind to chase him out of the 100-herb garden no matter what. Li Qingshan smiled. Are you blind? AI, this mouth of mine, why is it so disobedient? Everyone was shocked. The middle class of the Myriad Appearance sect was very clear. Even if they were of the same cultivation level, when a disciple who had just entered the hall saw a disciple who had just entered the hall, they had to bow in greeting, not to mention a disciple whose cultivation level was lower by a large realm. They didn't expect that this Li Qingshan would be so arrogant and bold, cursing as soon as he opened his mouth. Chen Yushu's expression changed, but he suppressed his anger. This matter was a bit over the line, so he had to do it beautifully. He coldly said, Working hard now, don't you think it's too late? Li Qingshan picked his ear and lightly blew at it. What does it have to do with you? AI, forget it, let it be. As long as it's happy, it's fine. Chen Yushu couldn't bear it anymore and angrily shouted, Audacious! You, a disciple who has just entered the hall, dare to be rude to a disciple who has just entered the hall. Not only is this dereliction of duty, it's also rebelling against your superiors. Originally, I wanted to drive you out of the 100-herb garden, but now I have to send you to the Punishment Bureau for trial. I can't go to the Punishment Bureau. Li Qingshan smiled. Lung Yuan didn't like him, so wouldn't he be sending himself to his door? This isn't up to you. Chen Yushu summoned a 9-segment green bamboo cane, and like a bolt of lightning, he pointed it at the space between Li Qingshan's eyebrows. Li Qingshan lazily got up, and with a casual grab, the 9-segment green bamboo cane fell into his hand. With a forceful thrust, it hit Chen Yushu's chest with a speed faster than before. Chen Yushu flew down the hill, and the sound of bones breaking could be faintly heard. Chen Yushu's eyes widened, his face filled with disbelief. Relying on his higher cultivation level, he thought he could easily take down Li Qingshan, but he didn't expect that it would be like this. Only then did the crowd of cultivators react, and they were all stunned. The one who flew out was Senior Brother Chen. How is this possible? There is a large realm difference between them. So how come the situation seems to be reversed? Some people also noticed that the hundreds of clones and more than 10 puppets were still working in an orderly manner, not the slightest bit affected. How can this kind of person stay in the 100-herb garden? Wan Yaozhu ignored them and only said to the visiting disciples, I hired you to work in the 100-herb garden, not for you to uphold justice. Please do your own things. If something like this happens again, leave the 100-herb garden. Yes, senior sister. Everyone loudly responded, not daring to disobey. This kind of safe, stable, and beneficial job was hard to come by in the entire Myriad Appearance sect. Who would be willing to be expelled from the 100-herb garden? Besides, after seeing Li Qingshan's performance, the injustice in their hearts also disappeared. This proved that Wan Yaozhu's vision was indeed not wrong. Even if they didn't want to admit it, this kind of method was definitely worth several of them. Chen Yushu's intentions were a bit suspicious. Only Chen Yushu's expression fluctuated. He was silent, as if he was very unconvinced. Wan Yaozhu looked over and saw Shun Yushu descending from the sky. He lowered his head and cupped his hands. Yes, senior sister. Li Qingshan looked over Wan Yaozhu's shoulder and saw everyone bowing their heads. She was by no means an astute and powerful person. On the contrary, she was usually too gentle and too wooden. But at this moment, she unexpectedly had a kind of arrogant and imposing manner. After all, in the path of cultivation, cultivation was the most practical. A human emperor was a cut above others, and a modest and benevolent monarch was still a monarch. Wan Yaozhu waved her hand, and everyone dispersed. Li Qingshan smiled and said, "Thanks." Wan Yaozhu returned to her senses and pursed her lips as she stared at him. Li Qingshan said, "Are you angry?" "Sorry, I shouldn't have cultivated for so many days. I didn't think it would take so long in the beginning. Not because of this. Oh, then blame me for hitting that Shun Yushu. But he was the one who made the first move." Li Qingshan raised both of his hands. "But I'm still sorry I shouldn't have caused trouble in your territory. It's also not because of this. Junior brother Shun has a selfish motive, so he wanted to find trouble with you. Even if you didn't make a move, I wouldn't have let him harm a hair on you." Li Qingshan was stunned. "Then why?" Wan Yaozhu repeated word by word, "The path of fighting and killing, you die and I live, massacring cities and exterminating countries, stopping at nothing." Only now did Li Qingshan understand that her dissatisfaction with him was actually because of one sentence. He thought to himself, "Women are really troublesome. But who asked this woman to treat me so well?" He could only spread his hands. "I'm just saying, but this is reality. I can understand that you cultivate the heavenly book of freedom and want to walk the path of freedom," Wan Yaozhu said. "But I don't want you to become that kind of person who stops at nothing, or else I will loathe you." Li Qingshan frowned and didn't back down anymore. He looked straight into her eyes. "What if I am that kind of person? What if I didn't just say these words, but also did them? I've already said that not everyone is as lucky as you to be able to live a clean and innocent life in this kind of place. Do you know how many battles I went through to be able to stand in front of you? I don't want to deceive you. If you loathe someone like me, feel free to chase me out of the 100 Herb Garden. But I will still do my best to repay your kindness." He could apologize for anything as long as the person was worthy of his gentle treatment. However, the existence of Tao must be upheld no matter who that person was. If someone questioned him with words, he would refute with words. If someone tried to stop him with actions, he would break it with his fists. Wan Yaozhu took half a step back and let out a long sigh. "Isn't standing here enough?" "Of course not." Li Qingshan smiled, dispelling the heavy atmosphere. "At least I want to be on equal footing with you, or let you call me senior brother." Wan Yaozhu said angrily, "You wish." She then said seriously, "I don't know what you have experienced, but I will do my best to persuade you to do good. Even if you are unhappy, I will still say it because I believe you don't want to be a bad person." Chapter 1400. Li Qingshan was slightly taken aback. Then he laughed out loud, his laughter echoing in the rain. He was extremely happy. He set off towards beyond the 9 heavens. Along the way, it was not just for a promise, but also for meeting such a cute girl on the way. "I'm willing to listen to senior sister's teachings." Wan Yaozhu said, "Don't laugh. There will be times when you'll be frustrated." Li Qingshan smiled. "Since I've come to the human realm, my greatest fortune is meeting you. Even if I'm a little frustrated, I can only endure it." "Same to you." Wan Yaozhu could not help but avert her gaze, avoiding his burning gaze. She looked back at the many clones and puppets plowing in the fields. "Maybe I should give you some more work." Li Qingshan clasped his hands. "I couldn't ask for more." As a result, his responsible field, expanded from a radius of 5 kilometers to a radius of 50 kilometers. It expanded by 25 times, and he was never disturbed again. He did not let Guan Yaozhu down. With the powerful deduction ability of the spirit turtle transformation and the keen senses of the Qilin transformation, he used the many shadow clones conjured from the heavenly tome of freedom to work hard day and night. Not only did he complete the basic work, but he also did everything he could to stimulate the vitality of all the plants, making them grow more and more vigorous. Another month passed like this. The 100-herb garden entered winter, senior sister. When the first snow fell, the fine snow drifted down and covered the ground. Guan Yaozhu arrived on the back of a deer. Li Qingshan was cultivating under the golden leaf Bodhi tree. He did not feel the flow of time at all. The last time they met seemed like yesterday. In the blink of an eye, he saw Guan Yaozhu's smile again. Guan Yaozhu looked around and smiled in satisfaction. "You've done well." As she said that, she flicked her fingers. The badge on Li Qingshan's chest lit up. He checked with his spiritual sense and was slightly surprised. "So many." Guan Yaozhu smiled. "Originally, your reward should be half contribution and half bookmarks, but I made the decision for you and gave you both contributions. There's also an additional reward. Is this in line with the rules? Don't let Lutian find fault with me and say I cheated." Over a month in the human realm. More than a year had already passed in the 5 continents world. Under the operations of Green Towering Mountain and the Banyan Tree King, a city of novelists was rising. It had already caused a wave in the entire world, and countless people had thrown themselves into this cause. Soon he would be able to bloom and bear fruit, and then he could openly cheat. What Lutian? He's your senior brother. When you see me, you must call me senior sister. Do you understand? Guan Yaozhu lectured. However, she usually didn't have any majestic aura and still appeared weak and weak. Li Qingshan smiled and said, "As the saying goes, there is no father and son in a casino, not to mention brothers and sisters." Guan Yaozhu shook her head helplessly. "Don't worry, using bookmarks to exchange for contribution points. This is a common practice in the sect. There won't be any problems. I'm just worried that you'll be at a disadvantage. The better the 100-herb garden is managed, the better. The more spirit herbs I supply to the sect, the more contribution points and bookmarks I can get from the myriad nature sect. How can I lose out?" "That's good." Li Qingshan looked at the 9-colored deer strangely, wondering why she didn't interrupt today. The 9-colored deer raised her head proudly and closed her eyes. After what Guan Yaozhu said that day, she decided not to talk to Li Qingshan anymore, but because of Guan Yaozhu's unusual appearance when she returned to the cave abode last time, she still wanted to help her master keep an eye on him. Guan Yaozhu said, "You have the Qilin bloodline, so you can feel the heart of the plants and understand their needs. You use water and fertilizer to the extreme and control it to the slightest degree. What's wrong with that? All living beings born in this world must experience hardships in order to grow strong. There must be sunlight, rain, and dew, as well as snow and drought. Plants are intelligent, but they are ignorant and heartless. Besides, even humans, who are the most intelligent of all living beings, if you gave them whatever they wanted, what would they become? At least they'd be fat. When you don't care about them and only care about cultivation, these plants will wither a bit, but in order to obtain nutrients, they will take root even deeper. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, so I don't care. Instead, I'm afraid that you're taking care of them too meticulously, so I increased your workload. I didn't think you could do this." Li Qingshan sighed. "I didn't think that taking care of them too meticulously would also be a problem." Guan Yaozhu smiled and comforted him. "If it were someone else, I would advise them to take care of these plants carefully because no matter how meticulous they are, they won't be able to reach your level. But you can do better. Cultivation is the same. It's good to advance bravely, but you can't be too hasty. More haste, less speed. If you're too impatient for results and want to do everything, you won't be able to reach your goal. In more practical terms, even if it's just to use their fruits and leaves to refine pills, it'll be most effective if they grow slowly. Let nature take its course. A light flashed in Li Qingshan's mind, as if it was the first ray of light that pierced through the dark night. He muttered to himself, "Let nature take its course. Let nature take its course. I understand." He finally understood why his Qilin strategy of longevity had always been stagnant. It wasn't because he was too evil, but because he was too impatient. All along, he had adhered to the words, "Advance bravely," advancing without fear of hardships and dangers. This spirit had long since fused into his blood, becoming a kind of instinct. The bottleneck of cultivating the Qilin strategy of longevity stemmed from this belief. However, the Qilin transformation was different from other transformations. It wasn't that he wasn't diligent enough. On the contrary, he was too diligent and spent too much energy. If there was a common characteristic among the rare flowers and plants in the 100 Herb Garden, it would be that they grew very slowly. Some spiritual trees didn't even change after more than 10 years. However, he was too impatient. Thus, he did good deeds and accumulated virtue just to be in line with the Qilin's path. Thus, he cultivated diligently, wishing that he could devote all his energy. It was like planting a seed that didn't germinate, so he watered it more and applied more fertilizer. He even couldn't help but dig it up to see if there was a problem with the seed. In the end, things didn't go as he wished. The seed didn't have a problem, but he had a problem. He once heard a story about a hunchback with the surname of Gua who was very good at planting trees. There was never a tree that didn't grow well, and it was very lush. Others couldn't learn it. When someone asked him, he said, "I can't make the tree grow quickly or live long. I'm just following the nature of the tree. I can make the roots stretch out, make the soil firm, and so on." Once the tree was planted, there was no need to care too much and let the tree grow naturally. Others were either too careless or too worried. They would look at the tree in the morning and touch it at night. They would even shake it to see if the roots were deep. If they peeled the bark to see if the tree had dried up, they would kill the tree instead. The Qilin takes pity on the common people. Originally, as long as one had a benevolent heart, he would have the foundation to cultivate the Qilin strategy of longevity. However, he could never become a good person. It was inevitable that he would fall into a dilemma. The more he wanted to be in line with the Qilin's path, the more he would deviate from the Qilin's path. The Qilin's path didn't lie in being benevolent and kind, but in letting nature take its course. It was like the growth of plants and trees, withering and flourishing with each passing year. As long as he didn't completely abandon his benevolent heart, the Qilin transformation would grow like a big tree. Killing intent and evil thoughts were just necessary to go through wind, frost, rain, and snow. It wasn't possible, and it didn't need to be. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.